Live. Right, we should be live now, Chairman.
Right. Good evening, everybody, councillors and visitors alike. This is a meeting of the Colchester Borough Council, full council, on the 24th of February 2021. It's being held on Zoom for councillors and speakers, and on YouTube, the CBC YouTube channel for visitors. I'm Councillor Robert Davidson. I'm currently Mayor of the Borough of Colchester, and I will be chairing the meeting tonight. I want to confirm that all of us present in the room are adhering, the room I'm in, that is, are adhering to the latest government guidance. There are 4 of us in this room, and we are meeting socially distanced requirements. Whilst we're not wearing masks, we are more than 2 meters apart, and they will be worn as and when we leave our seats. We have undertaken a COVID risk assessment for this meeting. To begin, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Would all participants please mute their microphones unless they are invited to speak? Could participants indicate to speak by using the raise hands facilities? The votes tonight will be administered by a roll call of councillors or by informal indications, depending on the subject matter. And we will look to have breaks of approximately every 90-minute intervals. Thank you. I'd like to invite my chaplain, the Reverend Amanda Elms, to say prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to everyone. So let us pray. As we meet together this evening for this full council meeting, we thank you for giving us gifts and skills which we may use in the service of this great borough. Please guide us through your Holy Spirit so that wise and informed decisions are made this evening. Help us to discuss the issues before us with courtesy, truth and mutual respect, and grant that all who are representative of this community and its people will seek to serve the common good through him who came not to be served, but to serve, Jesus Christ our Lord. Especially during this time of pandemic, we give thanks for the vaccine which we now have and is being rolled out so efficiently in our borough at this time, and that the R number is decreasing. At the same time, we remember and pray for all those who have been affected adversely, both financially and physically, for those whose livelihoods have come to an end, and for those who are vulnerable physically, mentally and emotionally, and for those who have lost loved ones due to COVID-19. We give thanks for our Mayor, Councillor Robert Davidson, and all the members of the council. Please bless them all as they do in and for this borough. Amen. May we join together in the prayer Jesus taught his disciples then and now. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you. You're still muted.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and wish you a good evening.
Thank you very much. I wish you all well. Thank you. Bye.
Right, so we have no apologies received apart from one late arrival, and that's Councillor Kevin Bentley. He'll be joining us shortly, hopefully. Item 2 is Have Your Say, and we have 8 speakers tonight and 1 written submission. So the following persons all wish to speak about the local plan, I believe. So we've got, in this order, Chris Piggott, Councillor Roger Mannion from Tiptree Parish Council, Thomas Rowe, Jodie Clark, and then the remaining speakers may be on different subjects: Jeremy Hagan, Angela Linghorn Baker, Fabian Green, and Stephen Rowe. And then we have a written submission from Andrew Hamilton. So I'd like to invite Chris Piggott to speak for up to 3 minutes. There'll be a bell at 2 minutes, and you'll have a further minute to finish off. Then after the reply from the portfolio holder, you are allowed to have another minute to respond to the response. Okay, Mr. Piggott, please.
Good evening, thank you. So the council has allocated £500,000 for the local plan in its budget. Will the council today support my call for money to be set aside to help establish a country park at Middlewick? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a response, please, from Councillor Julie Young, the portfolio holder for the local plan?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members. Yes, of course. I don't think Mr. Piggott has been along to a local plan committee in the past, and I would commend the process to him so his views can be taken in account in accordance with how we do things at the Borough Council. But thank you for the opportunity to attend this budget setting meeting this evening. Just to be clear, there are 20 country parks in Essex. 2 are in Colchester at Cudmore Grove and Highwoods Country Park. I would urge Mr. Piggott to speak to his MP and make his views known and ask him to press his ideas about a country park onto the MOD, because of course they are the owners of that site. You will be glad to know that having seen an advance copy of this question, I asked the Cabinet member at County Hall, Councillor Walsh, to clarify the process in setting up a new country park. Just for his information, they frequently include a car park with revenue going to the County Council in that car parking charges, a visitor centre, toilets, and sometimes a cafe. As part of the local plan process, country parks can be considered. I understand that you might want to consider coming along and setting out more fully your proposals for Middlewick and whether a country park is actually the appropriate way forward for that site. Certainly for my feelings about local residents, they are very keen to see a much more biodiverse future for the site. And I think it's a matter for the local plan committee to consider how they take that forward. But I thank you for attending this evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Our next speaker, Thomas Rowe, please. Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Robert. The Council's reckless handling of the local plan has shown how its top-down approach has failed. Will the Cabinet members back funds for neighbourhood plans to help protect areas such as Bullock Wood and enable us to promote a true infrastructure-first approach across Colchester? With millions spent in a collapsed development company that built 0 houses, we can't afford another disaster. The Council likes to talk about community credentials and involving residents, but I just haven't seen that. Your actions don't correspond to your statements. Neighbourhood plans enable communities the chance to engage in long-term planning decisions impacting their areas and could be used to enable communities to approve their own planning through neighbourhood development orders. Taking such an approach might have avoided the Middlewick Ranges debacle. In adopting a community-led approach, it would be possible to reconnect residents with the planning process, to develop a sense of connection to their natural, and in the case of St John's and St Anne's, ancient environment. When on the doorstep, pre-COVID obviously, people question the overdevelopment and how it's encroaching on the much-loved Bullock Wood ancient woodland. It is important that we act now to safeguard this precious resource for future generations. New developments across Colchester are often seen by existing residents as banks of houses for people who rely on cars and rarely interact with their neighbours. They pave over agricultural or environmentally important land and just add to congestion on Colchester's already creaking infrastructure. We need to think smarter about the way we build communities. I would like to see commercial property for small shops incorporated into new estates to reduce the reliance on travelling to big supermarkets by car. We must be smarter at leaving pockets of land wild within estates to allow insects and small animals to thrive. I remember the Lib Dems once campaigning on making Colchester a bee-friendly town. To date, I haven't seen them deliver anything of worthwhile. By putting forward funds to support neighbourhood plans, you could allow residents to deliver on that promise for you. So will you back funds for neighbourhood plans to help protect areas such as Bullockwood and enable us to promote a true infrastructure first approach across Colchester? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rowe. Can we have a response, please, from Councillor Julie Young?
Yes, of course, Mr. Mayor. Neighbourhood plans are just that, plans prepared by communities, not by the council. Officers have and will continue to support all those that have been put forward. The council does not have funding for neighbourhood plans. Groups that take them forward can apply for funding from groups like the government and the local development corporations. Today, I'm delighted that the new engagement website for the Tendring Colchester Borders Guard community has been launched. This will enable everyone to feed in their ideas in all sorts of ways. Garden communities allow us to address some of the very issues you have mentioned, such as neighbourhood centres. I should say, however, that we do already plan for small shops in developments, Chesterwell being an example, where not only shops will be provided, but also a primary and secondary school.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Mr. Rowe, would you like to comment for another minute, or are you satisfied with that?
I mean, it's the usual response. It's somebody else's problem, so that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking part. Jodie Clark is the next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having worked in Wivenhoe for a number of years and now as a resident, one thing has always been made crystal clear to me. Wivenhoe is a small but proud village with a colourful history and a rich heritage. Its residents, many of which have lived here for generations, strongly resonate with the beautiful surrounding area and cherish the green wedge between the village and Colchester itself. The council leader, Councillors Young and Liddy, will be well aware of this sentiment. And so I respectfully ask the council leader, Councillors Young and Liddy, why they voted for a local plan that endangers the very identity of those who reside in Wivenhoe.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Young again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all three councillors four councillors that serve the Wivenhoe community well are fully aware of the special characteristics of that Wivenhoe community, and we applaud the work that has been done in the past by that neighbourhood in developing its own neighbourhood plan, Mr. Mayor. And I think, you know, we're acutely aware of the importance of the green wedge. And that is why I think all of us have been so keen to ensure that there is a green buffer between not only Wivenhoe, but other communities such as Elmsted Market and Greensted, to make sure that the special identity of those existing settlements are maintained. So I think in answer to the question from Jodie, I would say that the new plan gives a greater level of protection to the Wivenhoe community that perhaps was there in the past. But I'm sure the council leader will want to explain his views about this, and I'm sure Councillor Liddy would like to do likewise. But I think for us as councillors, we have to consider these matters for the good of the borough as a whole. Whilst we all get elected to serve this authority from our own distinct communities. We are borough councillors, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Councillor Mannion from Tiptree Parish Council hasn't been able to join us. So Mr. Clifford will read his submission for you to respond to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The submission takes form of a question, which is as follows. Will the portfolio holder apologise to communities like Tiptree who have suffered from speculative development because of the council's mishandling of the local plan? And that's the end of the question.
Councillor Young, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. It is not the local plan that allocates sites in Tiptree. It is the neighbourhood plan. So there's nothing to apologise for. The work of the neighbourhood plan began in 2014. So it was delays in the early years that led to the speculative applications. We've worked very hard, Mr. Mayor, to make sure that we maintain our 5-year housing supply. We are confident that we do have that, and that should give us some protection going forward to speculative development proposals. And of course, we have now adopted Section 1 of the local plan, which gives us further protection. So I hope that gives some comfort to Mr. Mannion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Young. As you know, the 5-year supply wasn't approved at the last public inquiry, I think, in Tiptree, and that may have prompted the question, but we'll leave it there for now. The next speaker we got is Jeremy Hagan. So Jeremy Hagan, please.
Good evening, councillors. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. How are you doing this evening? Thank you for inviting me on. Councillors will shortly be voting on Colchester Council Cabinet proposals to increase the borough's share of council tax for residents across Colchester, Wivenhoe and Stanway. At this incredibly difficult time for many, when other councils have frozen their share of council tax, now seems the right time to ask the leader a question. Does he now regret years of wasting millions of pounds of local taxpayers' money? Let's remember, more than £1.3 million was wasted on pursuing an unsound plan for a new town on the edge of Stanway. To put this into perspective, this would have been the largest new town built in the UK since Milton Keynes. And let us not forget the thousands of pounds wasted on self-congratulatory propaganda and an undesirable rebranding to Britain's first city. Will he take this opportunity to now apologise to the residents across the borough, admitting his failure to lead a fiscally responsible council? Thank you.
Councillor Corey, would you like to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Jeremy. I took on the leadership when the local plan was quite a way through, and I believed in looking at the best possible solutions, which was to go back and do a spatial strategy to look at the best places to put development. Because we were being asked by the government to deliver lots of housing, that is by the Conservative government. We actually pushed to have a lower housing target, which we did achieve, but we were threatened to have a higher housing target if we did not put forward a plan. We worked with Conservative-run Braintree Council, we worked with Conservative-run Tendring Council, and we worked with Conservative-run Essex County Council in order to work together with our neighbours, because that's what we were encouraged to do. And actually, I'm really proud of that working together. Now, we had challenges, of course, the challenge of having to produce so much housing that the government wanted us to. But we looked at ways in trying to do it differently, and we experimented. We tried to look at different ways that would actually deliver infrastructure first, and the government pushed for us to do that. The government put in lots of funding in order for us to do that. The majority of the funding was from the Conservative government. So I'm not going to apologise for their spending on our projects and for them backing us to take a longer term view to try and create developments that work in a better way. Now, you may have known, you may not have known, that I was talking with communities as much as possible to listen to the feedback. People like Rosie Person, I would listen to and look at how actually we could try and develop smaller communities overall that grew larger, something that I went to Parliament. Thank you to Bernard Jenkins for inviting me to that, where I actually sat with other members from the Conservative Party and listened to a really good speech by someone who had developed the Poundbury site, and actually listened to how that developed small communities of about 2,500 and then linked another 2,500. So there are innovative ways of doing this, and I'm sure you would be invited by Sir Bernard Jenkin to go and visit Poundbury to look at that. And really, I think it's something that we have ensured over the years that actually council tax has not risen in Colchester if you look at a 10-year period, and actually where we had a zero increase, but actually had cuts from the central government over the years, which again, I wouldn't ask you to apologise for. So overall, I think it's about how we have worked together with our partners locally to deliver what's best for the people of Colchester through the challenges, the ups and downs, the cuts, and even recently the pandemic. Well, we've got to a point where we have a plan that we will work with to deliver as best as possible, but enjoy better engagement with the existing communities to make sure we listen and ameliorate the plan as best as possible.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corey. Mr. Hagan, do you have a minute to respond to that?
I was just curious, actually, exactly what Councillor Corey was asking me personally to apologise for. I'm saddened that he's had this opportunity, the council leader has had this opportunity to apologise to residents for spending, losing £1.3 million, for losing thousands on vanity projects and self-propaganda. And he's going to, vote tonight to raise that council tax across Colchester, and I believe that's not the right thing to do right now. But thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Angela Linghorn Baker. Would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, everyone. I'd like to ask about the tennis courts on Wivenhoe Road. As you know, these are the only municipal tennis courts in this area. And further, they're currently one of very limited sports facilities in the south of Colchester. Something I think we're all seeing in the current climate is the importance of outdoor sports and recreation. It undoubtedly improves mental and physical well-being, and to remove that facility is something I think very sad for all of us. You may remember I asked about the future of the courts this time last year, and I was informed that the council couldn't rule out building on the site. Unfortunately, very little has been heard since, which is hugely unsettling for the residents and the many people who use this facility regularly. Surveys have been carried out locally, pegs laid in the ground, and when approached, surveyors have said they're from amphora homes. So there is a lot, really, I think, of upset and a bit of distrust at the moment among the residents. So my question is, will the portfolio holder rule out building on the Wivenhoe Road tennis courts and commit to enhance funds to enhance sports and leisure facilities in Shrub End? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Higgins to respond, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think I've answered on this before, but I will repeat what I've said in the past. At the moment, the site is being looked at as it requires some investment to future-proof it. We need to know the extent of this for future financial planning and to assess whether it is good value of public expenditure. I know that many of you feel strongly about the tennis use. However, the level of use over several years and pre-COVID-19 brings its long-term sustainability into focus. All options need to be considered in order to make informed decisions. And just for information, the land was purchased, i.e. not donated, by the council in the 1930s for £4,350. It was therefore not gifted to the council. And that information is readily available via the land registry. As with all CBC assets, we will be considering how to make best use of this site to future-proof it over the long term. It doesn't rule out keeping tennis courts there at all. That is my answer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Higgins. I would hope that there's a public consultation before any major change like that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure there will be.
Right, the next speaker is Mr. Green, Fabian Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, councillors. There is no budgetary provision for the Cabinet's decision to take legal action to force through an unwanted development on Queen Street by private developer Wivenhoe. Will the Cabinet member categorically rule out wasting further taxpayer money on this contract and development?
Thank you. The Speaker, Councillor King, could you respond, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Fabian, for the question. The way this works is that the actions we need to take come from a general pot, a general financial provision. So there is, you're correct, no specific budgetary provision for action on development. It's part of what we do to enable, in accordance with our rights and our duties as a planning authority, to ensure that issues such as this are handled according to law and good practice, and this is no different. So this is not about wasting taxpayers' money, and I will say it is, as discussed elsewhere, very much about bringing forward a development that will bring huge benefit to many. Footfall, regeneration, attraction for additional investment. I absolutely get that it's disliked by many, and I and my colleagues are rueful about that. There will be some learning to be taken. There always is about the handling of controversy, but I can absolutely say we're both meeting as best we can the needs and concerns of those most directly affected, but also keeping our eye on, and I urge you and others to do the same, the undoubted benefits of having regeneration in the heart of the town at a time of economic crisis and deep concerns for many businesses. This investment, Wivenhoe, disliked though it is by some, will bring jobs and retain many others. And that's the context for my answer, but my answer specifically is as given. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor King. Mr. Green, you have a minute to respond if you wish.
No, I'd just like to thank Councillor King for that response.
Thank you for joining us. The next speaker we've got is Mr. Rowe, Stephen Rowe. Thank you.
We've had him.
Mr. Rowe, Stephen Rowe, are you there?
I am there. I'm sorry about that. The battery's just disappeared in my mouse. I do apologise. Good evening, councillors. Good, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is about the proposed giant elephant that was supposed to be installed on the Albert Roundabout as part of the £200,000 scheme. I'd like to know who signed off on the proposal, what budget did this council set aside for this project, and how much had been spent before the council realised this idea was very unpopular with the electorate and then scrapped it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's probably under Councillor Goss's portfolio. Councillor Goss. Councillor Goss, could you respond to that, please?
Yes, thank you for the question. I will make sure you get a full written answer. The high-level response to that is that the Fixing the Link project is funded by Essex County Council, Colchester Borough Council and Greater Anglia collectively as a partnership. It has been running for some years and there has been a number of phases of the project delivered much before my time. So it has run over several years. But what I will do is get you a written response of the detail on the budget, etc. And there will be an update coming in due course on Fixing the Link. But thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goss. Mr. Rowe, do you wish to speak again?
Yeah, I think that was a fairly unsatisfactory answer, really. I'm sure there's a rough ballpark figure for how much was spent. It may well have been involving various different people, the whole project, but I'd like to know whose actual vanity project the elephant was. And indeed, how much money was wasted, I think is the important thing that people need to know. I know I'm going to get a written response, but I'd like to have had it in public.
We'll make sure those details are included in the response. Thank you very much. And I'd like to invite all our speakers to leave and join the YouTube channel now, if that's all right. And meanwhile, we'll ask Mr. Clifford to speak Mr. Hamilton's submission. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a written submission we've had from Andy Hamilton, and the submission is as follows. It's entitled Colchester Council Tree Planting in Our Parks. The tree planting is now done by council contractors without volunteers, no public consultation or aftercare plans. The trees were given free by the Woodland Trust, so it is a shame to see so many dying. I can only echo the alarm by Gary Knight regarding the failure of Colchester Council's tree planting scheme. The lack of public consultation over locations and no provision for aftercare can lead to disaster, as shown in Spring Lane Park. So much land has been built on that, it is depressing to see part of the few remaining green spaces being turned into dense woodland of little use to the public. It would be helpful if in future Colchester Council was less arrogant and instead engaged in constructive discussion. Please stop ruining our open spaces. And that's the end of the statement, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clifford. And I believe Councillor King is going to respond to that.
I am indeed, Mr. Mayor, and I thank Mr. Hamilton for his question, even if we do not have him here. I don't accept his description of the way we approach this. I've been involved in a lot of this personally, and I know how hard, officers work to ensure that we do engage, we do listen, and we do some learning as we go. I do share his concern, however, at the high rates of tree loss. To put this in perspective, these are whips. They're a few pence only. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, 1 second. It pays to turn on your PC, Mr. Mayor. I do share his concern at the high rates of loss. I walked around the site and I saw this myself, but the cause was not poor planning or poor planting. The planting was done with a tremendous turnout of local people. I think we had about 100 up there. And when we put those whips in, those 40p, 2 foot long, very, very young trees, we did so with the ground was soft, but what we had was, as many will remember and look forward to this year, record breaking dry and hot weather last spring and summer. We will replace, we're choosing with even greater care the sites, so where we will plant, to ensure as much as we can, we choose places with shade and damp conditions where that's possible. And we will continue, as I've said, to engage and consult widely. We know that tree planting and our action on biodiversity has widespread support, both across the chamber, but with the public. And when COVID allows, we really look forward to returning, Mr. Mayor, to volunteer and community planting. Work being done by contractors and partners like Together We Grow is because we have no other choice at the moment. We are taking advice on where to plant. We are working with the Woodland Trust. They continue to support what we do, and we're taking good advice and wherever we can, following it on other sites. A last assurance, if I can. This is not about plantation. This is not about straight rows. That's what none of us would want. This will be about blending with what is already there, listening to what matters most, and we will adjust schemes as we go, as we get feedback. We'll do that learning. We'll apply that learning this year, what's left of the planting season, and next year. And the vision I and many others have is accessible additional woodland planting, which we can enjoy, that works for nature and biodiversity, as well as us humans. But I thank him for his observations and understand what drove them. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much, Councillor King. I'm concerned that Mr. Hamilton may not have been able to join the YouTube channel, as he could not join ours either. So perhaps you could give him a written answer as well.
I'll be happy to do that, Mr. Mayor, and I will offer, as I have to Mr. Knight, who was cross-referenced here, to meet with any in that area, as we have in this means meeting with ward councillors and others. So there is an active engagement, and I will pick up with Mr. Hamilton as part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Right, that concludes all the meetings, all the speakers, and I believe they've all left the Zoom meeting now. So the next item is item 3, declarations of interest. There is no need, I've been informed, to declare membership of other bodies, that is county council, parish councils, or other formal bodies. So are there any other declarations of interest? In that case, we'll move on to item 4, the minutes. And I'd like to move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of December last year be confirmed as a correct record. Could I ask if there are any objections to that, you put your hand up, otherwise we'll assume it is agreed. I see no hands, so it is agreed. Thank you. Item 5, Mayor's announcements. Obviously, you'll won't be surprised to know that there's no functions organised yet, although we're heartened to know that from June the 21st, we will be able to start meeting again and fundraising too. So item 6, items referred to under the call-in procedure, there are none of those either. So we now move to item 7, which is the main item of the evening, and that's the recommendations of the Cabinet panels and committees, the budget 21-22, and the medium-term financial forecast. So I'd like to invite Councillor Corey, the leader of the council, to move suspension of the procedure rule 14.3, which will allow the portfolio holder for business and resources, Councillor King, and the other group representative to speak untimed on this item only. All other speakers will get their normal 3 minutes. So, Councillor Corey, could you move that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the Council Procedure Rule 14.3 be suspended to allow for one representative of each political group to speak untimed on item 7.1 only. Now, moving this motion, I get 5 minutes to speak, but of course I won't take up that time. However, being slightly jealous of those who get to speak untimed later, I just wanted to ensure that those who do speak untimed later recognise the excellent efforts of this council, its caring, its energetic, hard-working staff, because this year has been extraordinarily difficult for all of us, but the efforts that staff had put in have been amazing. So I wanted to ensure that those who do speak untimed reflect upon that, because despite our political controversies and debates and sometimes raw discussions over the budgets later, let's remember and respect that we are having to cut back on budgets. Some of that meaning staff will be lost. So we must act responsibly. And we are very lucky, all of us, I know me in particular, but all of us, to lead and influence a superb set of staff with this council and how they've reacted during COVID, in particular, how they've reacted to support our most vulnerable, our businesses and all residents. And just 2 things I wanted to say to you today that from briefings I've had this morning, actually, about some really good figures in the borough. Just today, we've found out the figures across the country of getting out those grants to businesses, and in particular, the additional restrictions grant, which is the biggest grant. We have been second best in the country, okay, joint second best in the country. Now the league tables have come out today, and I think that's terrific. And I praise Sam Preston and her team that have delivered that for our businesses in Colchester. And secondly, I wanted to focus on how we not just support businesses, but we support our residents and often the most vulnerable. The contact and support call volumes over the last 12 months have been immense, as you can imagine, with 190,000 calls into our call centre, and they've been addressed, picked up and supported with only 39 seconds average wait time. So that is fantastic from that team as well. And that similar team help with the customer support team, help with benefits, employment support and welfare benefits that have been even more important over the last 12 months. And I wanted to just explain as well those figures where we've addressed 1,400 appeals and support for employment and applications being taken up for benefit, and also advice and benefits emails that have come in and out, 11,000 of those, and calls made just under 7,000. So it's that kind of respect that I want the people who are speaking on time to reflect upon and make sure that our budget discussions are as respectful as possible, because our council is really delivering for our residents and our businesses. So I please want us all to suspend the procedures going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corey. If anybody objects to that, could they put their hand up? Otherwise, we will carry on with those full speakers untimed. I see no hands raised, so that's accepted. Thank you. So, Councillor King, if you'd be good enough to move motion B, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 536 of the Cabinet meeting of the 27th of January 21, together with the recommendations contained in the reports entitled Supplementary Budget Report and Precept and Council Tax Levels 2021-22, be approved and adopted. First slide, please. Mr. Mayor, to help members and the public, I will draw out some of the key features of the budget as we respond to an unprecedented economic and health crisis without parallel in modern times. And in just a moment, the slide will appear. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Mr. Mayor, these are the recommendations that members and the public would have seen. They're inclusive of a very modest 2% rise in council tax, despite the remarks earlier, and have your say, just an extra £5 per household. Important that we understand that the budget proposals are a coherent whole. They enable service delivery and supply, they provide help and support to our residents and the most vulnerable in society, as well as investment across Colchester that will deliver and sustain jobs, services, and this council's strategic plan. Next slide, please. We understand, don't we all, because it's personal as well as professional and public, that this year has been an extraordinary one, macroeconomic and other challenges and different ways of working, of lockdown and open and lockdown and open, and huge disruption to many. This is an opportunity to say we as members and residents have been served extraordinarily well by our officers, as the leader has said for us all. They've been fantastic. And that work includes the response to the budget. Next slide, please. Shielding, track and trace, vaccination are vital, but today is about the money. It's more than health and business partner relationships, although those do have influences on the bottom line. Now, our officers have helped this administration make possible this budget. They helped us during the last year, and it's very relevant as we look forward to applying a tourniquet as income hemorrhaged, as services were stopped, as car parks were closed, testing how income could be raised, and looking at service improvements, efficiencies, digitisation. Transformation is the phrase, delivering better for less cost. And they've done a really great thing of taking their staff with them. And I think this is admirable. They have shared ideas, they've got ideas back, and they've delivered the savings in this year and next, and the start of later years with their officers, with their staffs. I think this is tremendous work. I thank them. We want as few of them as to leave as possible, but that is a consequence for some. and we want to do so well with least redundancy. They all deserve our thanks for helping this administration, for us all, deliver another balanced budget and a way ahead that will command support. Members will know that we've had a great deal of interchange during this last year. 3 scrutiny, 3 cabinet and 4 member workshop meetings illustrated the degree of convulsion, frankly, and change we had to grapple with at pace. Plus, let us not forget, Councillor Bourne will never a task and finish group, a very glistening cherry on top. That deeper and wider engagement has been very much welcomed, and it's very much what I wanted to do. It opens the door to other members to have a voice in a way that some understandably want to, and we do it better together. That does make it more disappointing. We will spend time tonight, but I will respect the process, and of course, in addressing what I think certainly are unfunded, and I'd argue are narrowly political main amendments, but we'll have that conversation. As a minority administration, we really do listen to others in crafting a budget, and this one deserves support because it reflects what residents need and what we must do to make their lives better, and that is ground on which I hope we can all stand together. We could not be more open. Doing so, Mr. Mayor, meant I've learned what members are prepared to do, and I thank them for it, cutting their valued locality budgets, absolutely engaging in the conversation, and also what members are not prepared to do for their residents, and understand in many respects why not to raise garden waste charges. And what that meant, Mr. Mayor, is really important we all understand. What that meant was that we had to, the administration quite rightly, with officers, deal with that challenge, how to balance the books and find a way ahead. Next slide, please. As set out within the supplementary budget paper, nearly 2.6 million will be found in efficiencies, transformation and savings, which is a huge achievement. We will balance the books, but we'll do it only by drawing on all available sources of funds as well as reserves, as we did this financial year. Next slide. The pandemic and the extraordinary economic hit suffered by so many, including this council, would have long-lasting impacts on our local economy and our finances. Only a sustained, robust economic recovery will bring the growth, spend and council income needed. But we are prepared, we do have a plan, or we can see the way ahead as summarily illustrated here. I don't want to sound like Boris, but there is some spring in the air, but this will be a tough time for this council and those we employ. It will of course be a tough time for businesses and many residents, many of whom will be concerned about their futures. It will be hugely demanding of any administration, whoever they are, of our officers and our senior team. We will respond as required at best pace towards recovery to the terms described in the budget. Next slide, please. This is a budget for all. We will continue to provide this year a rich mix of essential and highly valued discretionary and customer services, as touched on by the leader of the council. We will continue to be a council that delivers, and Business Grants is a great illustration, and one that wins awards for the quality of what we do and does have the respect of counterparts in local and central government. They do involve us in policy work as well as consultation. They do listen, which is absolutely fantastic for us and for those we seek to serve. This council will continue to attract investment and jobs, and will invest and new residents because we believe, and again I think we'd unite on this, Colchester is a great place to live, work and visit. Next slide. This is a budget that must be passed, that's obvious for us, but it's also a budget that must be passed for others, from parish councils to government. We have a national award-winning revenue collection team, very high rates of recovery, which is great. It's going to be a challenging year or more ahead, but still got high ambitions and aims. The thing we must note is what a tiny wedge we, Colchester Borough Council, take of the monies we raise for others, 10 or 11 pence in the pound. The rest, for very good reasons, goes to the county and others for education, social care, and the emergency services. Next slide, please. Excuse a spare F on the first line. Members will accept, and I've listed some points here, that there are huge issues and challenges for any administration to manage, not of our making. And they're made worse, and I don't do political and I'll get told off again, but they're made worse by the gap between the government's promise to meet all extra costs and lost income and the reality. What we've had has been welcome, but it's a very significant shortfall with some significant questions about mechanisms, technical adjustments yet to be worked through, and how long that support will be in place, limited though it is. And the changes that they propose or have brought in place that affect new homes bonus for a local authority that's done what's been asked, that's really difficult to swallow. And consultations about the future, which are deeply troubling. It's understandable to have a levelling up agenda. In many respects, we will all support that, but we have to watch as a local authority that those changes may yet draw essential income away from this council. Our response is to, as detailed in the budget, wean ourselves off as best we can, but in these straitened circumstances, any adjustments to the formulas on which we rely, to be frank, it's plain, is going to be another difficult challenge. But we are as prepared as is possible. Our ambitions are affordable. Our treasury management and external audit tests are passed with flying colours, as is the affordability assessment and prudential indicators provided in the papers we all have. This is a very well run local authority. Members can take confidence from that, I do. We should note, however, changes to future audit arrangements set by government, which we'll try to make the most of, and an adjustment we're seeking internally for efficiency terms to write off delegations. Our commitment, and I've had this conversation with governance and audit, as always remains to minimise loss, maximise income. Past prudence, I guess, is the bottom line here, does mean that for all the risks and issues we will have to manage, our reserves will help see us through. Next slide. Mr. Mayor, this is a budget for recovery and jobs from work across the town centre with the Business Improvement District to make sure that the town opens well, COVID secure, and with a hurrah. And we have, as many know, a fantastic gateway public realm improvements coming through at St Nicholas Square, as illustrated at the top, and the Balkan Gate at the bottom. These will provide some fantastic improvements to public realm. So we'll be able to welcome back the Mercury, and a new cafe culture life in the town will be reinforced. It's encouraging for us all in the timing in which and the manner in which this is being delivered will fit with the opening of the town. Next slide, please. 2 slides to go, Mr. Mayor. A budget for the future. The points speak for themselves. Our investments are bearing fruit now, as just described, from Northern Gateway to the town centre. And each investment sustains or creates jobs. We deploy the power of the public purse, as national government is at the moment, in support of local skills in employment. And this budget sets out, frankly, a fantastic way ahead. We'll tackle climate change, economic growth, affordable houses, health and well-being. We're investing in carbon reduction, low carbon, from electric vehicles to new recharging points, and of course £500,000, as many know, secured to make Rowan House low carbon and COVID safe. What's yet more exciting lies ahead. The town deal, supported across this chamber, awaits a decision that may come from the Chancellor, we hear, on the 3rd of March. Our hopes are high. The plans have been well received. We'll see, but they address real need, provide a step change in youth provision, tackle deprivation, deliver destination Colchester. Again, something we can agree upon, a greener, healthier, safer, historic, yet more beautiful Colchester that will attract residents and people. My colleague, the portfolio holder, will talk to housing, but we should just note some very significant sums talked about elsewhere. 40 million to the housing investment programme 21-22. So, as I say, in every sense, a budget for the future that's widened its spectrum, and at the heart of that is community. And so I'm really pleased that we can at long last get to the point where we can confirm, as we have done, investment in a new community centre to serve the people of Highwoods. They've waited a long time, and the St Mark's Centre will be, I'm absolutely sure of this, a fantastic place, mirroring what we've done elsewhere, Stanley and other parts of the town. Next slide. This is a budget that I say to members and the public does deserve support. It maintains essential services and generous local council tax support. It enables and supports full council's agreed strategic plan and the equality remit, which the chair of the scrutiny panel rightly drew to our attention when we last saw him. It is ambitious but affordable. It's crucial for business recovery and jobs. It has been shaped and tested with members and helped by robust scrutiny. I commend it to you all as it is, as a whole. It works in that way. Many thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Thank you very much, Councillor King. I'm sure we'll hear more from you later. As you know, councillors, there are 3 main amendments to this budget proposal. And so I'll move the first amendment. Councillor Buston, who has up to 5 minutes to speak.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 536 of the Cabinet meeting of the 27th of January 2021, together with the recommendations contained in the reports entitled Supplementary Budget Report and Precept and Council Tax Levels 2021-2022 be approved and adopted, subject to the main amendment, the details of which are at page 4 of the agenda. In short, the proposed amendment is that this council recognises increasing bereavement services costs by 3 times the current rate of inflation during a pandemic is unreasonable, and it really does not reflect well on the council or any of its members. Therefore, the 2.7% across the board increased cemetery and crematorium charges is abandoned for the financial year 21-22. That the anticipated £39,000 revenue loss shown in Appendix G, General Fund Budget, bereavement services balanced by the use of reserves for the financial year 21-22. Members, for those in this chamber who are old enough to remember, in the administration headed by our current mayor, I actually had the privilege to hold a portfolio that included funding this most essential and final of services that our borough council can provide to its residents. Fees and charges for the same were always an emotive subject. Nonetheless, it was generally accepted that in normal times we would seek to recover the costs of the service in order to run it efficiently and with compassion and care for our residents. We would not seek to profit from it. Members, we do not live in normal times. We are afflicted by a deadly virus, which has already carried off a singular number of our loved ones. This pandemic has touched us all. Indeed, only yesterday, a number of our family from right across the artificial divides of this chamber attended the very moving funeral of our late, hardworking, larger than life and very popular colleague, Alderman Terry Sutton, taken from us sadly early to his time by COVID-19. Members, it's my submission that our residents are suffering enough under the burdens of this awful virus. To add to these travails at the time of their most extreme sacrifice of their loved ones would be insensitive in the extreme. As before, and as I've mentioned, I fully appreciate the financial obligations upon the council to balance the budget. Nonetheless, there are options, particularly where, as here, both sum involved is not overly significant and there is an exceptional circumstance. Members, I cannot imagine anything more exceptional, frankly, pressing and immediate for our residents than the current pandemic and the effect it is having on them and their families. Thus, I suggest, and this is the reason for my amendment, that to increase bereavement charges, as is currently scheduled in the budget statement, would be considered by our residents to be both uncaring and cruel in the extreme, and would not reflect at all well upon any of our members, whatever their affiliation. Members, all members, please show some compassion to your residents in a moment of their extreme grief, and that their council, just for once, is on their side. Thank you. I'm sorry I haven't taken up 5 minutes, but there you go.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boston. I'd like to ask Councillor King whether he's willing to accept that amendment.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, thank you, Councillor King. In that case, as you have not accepted it, we will move to the other two amendments, and then we will all debate the main motion as amended, if amended. Is that correct, Councillor? Mr. Weavers?
With the amendment.
Just about correct. Okay. So our next amendment, I believe, is being brought by Councillor Barber. So you have up to 5 minutes to bring your amendment, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, councillors. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 536 of the Cabinet meeting of 27th January 2021, together with the recommendations contained in the reports entitled Supplementary Budget Report and Precept and Council Tax Levels 2021-2022 be approved and adopted, subject to the main amendment, the details of which are at pages 4 to 5 of the agenda. This being in relation to a construction of a workable proposal for a revised allocation of Middlewick, enabling the creation of a country park between Abbots Road and Birch Brook. I was pleased to hear Mr. Piggott attend and raise the important issue of considering the creation of a country park on Middlewick, and I was disappointed in the response of Councillor Young and slightly confused in relation to comments about development corporations and neighbourhood plans. I thought that was disappointing, particularly when the council have funded neighbourhood plans in my ward, and I think the question was more in relation to extending that support to other areas as a change in culture of planning policy, because all too often residents, the community, feel that development is tunnel vision and not engaging them, and Middlewick is an example of that, because colleagues across the chamber will know a simple fact. The council had a choice whether to allocate 1,000 homes on Middlewick or not. It is true the Ministry of Defence are looking to sell the site, but that does not mean there has to be this allocation. As with many landowners the council engages with, it can tell the MOD that it does not wish to allocate its site in the local plan. That is a simple fact. If you're listening and your councillor has told you that they had no choice but to put housing on Middlewick, they are misleading you. They did have a choice. The council's own planning team has confirmed the council had a choice in a public meeting, and I'm more than happy to provide that recording to members across the chamber on request, as I would do to members of the public. Another simple fact is my group voted against submitting the local plan to the inspector. Although a majority on the evening, the Liberal Democrats and Labour, passed it, we are not giving up, and we are determined to take steps to resolve this wrong. This evening, I'm proposing this motion on behalf of Colchester Conservatives to start this discussion that will hopefully, if successful, begin the process of creating a country park at Middlewick. Our votes, not words, are the most important tool we have available. Therefore, I'm pleased to give the opportunity to members across the chamber to show that they do really want to consider alternatives to Middlewick. They can do that by supporting this amendment this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I commend this to, well, the Zoom meeting rather than the chamber, but you get my idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillor King, do you accept that amendment?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, that's noted. So we move on to the third proposed amendment, and that's Councillor Willits, if you'd like to propose yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I propose that the recommendations contained in draft minute 536 of the Cabinet meeting on 27th of January and the recommendations contained in the reports entitled Supplementary Benefit Report and Precept and Council Tax Levies 2021-22 be approved and adopted subject to the following amendment by appending of words. If I might set out the background to my amendment, Mr. Mayor, Lexton Lake is a large expanse of water in the heart of leafy Lexton, opposite Lexton Church, a mere 1.4 miles from the town hall. It's been a significant feature of the area for over 150 years. The lake was acquired by CBC from Essex County Council in March 1990 and is now part of the Lexton Park and Playing Fields. Residential developments surround half its circumference. Now, during the summer of 2020, and for the first time in its history, as far as we know, its fish died, the pond was enveloped with an invasive verdure, it emitted a foul odour which constituted a public nuisance to surrounding dwellings. Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that had the lake been owned by anyone other than CBC, the council would have served a statutory notice on the owner under section 259 of the Public Health Act. And by now the council would have been prosecuting itself before the local magistrates. But we always overlook our own faults. Now, I've asked on numerous occasions when a costed plan would be produced for the remedial programme. Those councillors present at our meeting on the 3rd of December will recall that I asked repeatedly about the costed plan and the budgetary provision, all to no avail, hence my amendment this evening. My concern, and that of local residents, is that without proper budgetary provision, the park rangers will of course do what they can, but it will be ad hoc rather than addressing this urgent problem in a systematic way. So in view of the negligence of the council to address this problem, local residents have produced an outline costed remedial programme at £97,000. And this consists of, firstly, an extensive hydrographic survey to establish why the water flow from Lexton Park Springs and other sources has been more erratic than on other hot summers. I understand a cursory inspection was carried out, but not a proper survey. Removal of the invasive verdure from the surface. Thirdly, a scientific advice on flora and fauna, bank management, the sediment layer and the vegetation management. Fourthly, re-establishing a 2-metre margin of oxygenating plants around the lake. And fifthly, with the advice of the Environment Agency, installing an oxygenating fountain on the central island, either as a temporary measure or permanently if needed. Mr. Mayor, the residents of Lexton gawp in wondrous amazement at the grandiose programme the council has to spend some £25 million in the town centre. But they cannot understand why the council negligently fails to find funds to keep in good condition a lake it owns in the midst of the urban area and to stop it being a local nuisance for residents. I propose this budget amendment and I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor King, are you prepared to accept that one?
3 out of 3, no, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so none of the 3 amendments have been accepted. Now, the next, the debate is now thrown open once initially started by the 3 untimed speakers, but I'm conscious that it's 7:10, and rather than break the debate on the budget halfway through, I suggest we have an early break. So I'd like to stop the meeting or adjourn the meeting for 8 minutes, which will bring us back here at 19:20. Hopefully that's agreeable to you all. Okay, excellent. We'll see you soon. See you back at 19:20. Please turn your videos off and your speakers. Well, welcome back, councillors. I hope that the 8 minutes was long enough for you. We now get on to the debate on the budget, the main motion. So we've got 3 untimed speakers: Councillor Julie Young, Councillor Paul Dundas, and Councillor Gerard Oxford. After which I will call other councillors. So, Councillor Julie Young, you first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We meet in unprecedented times. We set our budget a year ago with no insight into the challenges we were set to face of rising demand for support and lack of income arising from closed car parks, Leisure World and our museum service. The effects of COVID have been wide-ranging, and our staff and members have not been immune to this in any way. I want to pause to reflect on the Herculean effort staff have gone to during the course of the past year. They have innovated, been flexible, stepped up, gone the extra mile, time and time again, to meet the needs of the community. Whether that be getting business grants out, as we've heard, we've had gold standard service there, or arranging support to the isolated. The Labour Group value and thank you. Members have been working hard too, and no more so than infrequently refreshing budgets to best navigate the movable feast before us. There hasn't been a time ever before that all members have been more proactively involved in the budget process. The administration have been open and willing for that involvement to take place. We had numerous workshops and a special group set up to consider garden waste charging, which was dropped, and no further ideas were offered from that group. This administration listens and tries to find better solutions. We all know that the government has not fulfilled early promises to give us the funding needed to match COVID costs, even though that promise were made. So it's particularly disappointing to see this uncoordinated last-minute amendment made by the Conservative group, which are merely politically motivated headline grabbers. They are incoherent and uncosted, and it's really disappointing that they have failed to take advantage of the opportunities they have been given to engage better in the process and negotiate change, as I'm sure Councillor King has very open ears to sensible suggestions. This authority was quick to declare a climate change emergency. We know that greenhouse gas is the biggest risk to the global economy and presents an even bigger risk than COVID. We are set to have wetter winters, more flooding, hotter summers with more droughts. This authority was already ahead of the game, and the Carbon Trust have recognised our efforts so far, but I'm proud to highlight the projects we are engaged in that will take us further. We are simply getting our own house in order, Mr. Mayor, with the decarbonisation of Rowan House. During the past year, we have adopted new working methods, and this has radically changed the way we need to approach office accommodation for our staff. The biggest contributor, of course, to greenhouse gas comes from vehicle emissions. So it's imperative that we use new developments to bring forward transport solutions which not only serve that community, but the existing communities, such as with the RTS. We need to invest more in walking and cycling. Our budgets must have the environment and meeting our climate change targets at the heart of what we do. Rewilding and greening our environments will help, and putting carbon eating planting where we can in the most polluting streets is a way forward. Mr. Mayor, we must all learn about this more. Our new homes can be built in a very sustainable way. Future homes standard ready. We have a vision to take our town beyond the pandemic and into recovery, and that is to bring footfall into the town by investing in our public realm, such as in the St Nicholas Square project and Balkan Gate, to create new modern working environments such as the bus depot grow-on space, and to develop new homes in our 40 million housing investment programme. Mr. Mayor, we have a lot to look forward to in the year ahead. We eagerly await the opening of our fantastic new Northern Gateway Sports Complex, which will provide the level of sporting facilities which will be the envy of other local authorities. Our cultural organisations have done all they can to support our communities, and we as an authority have helped and supported them. You will see the authority's continued support for culture as we are due to recruit our practitioner to develop a new cultural strategy for the town. This will provide an overarching framework which will recognise the very parts of our diverse culture and develop a resource that can take us forward and support us in getting more resources into the borough. We recognise the value of culture in the lives of our residents, and as a major source of employment, this has to be a priority. Our town will undoubtedly change with shops closing, and this administration are ready to navigate that change to continue to make the town a vibrant place to be. It's easy to look at other towns and say they do it better, but I think we do a fantastic job in bringing visitors to our town. We value our unique heritage and have invested in our first Roman church, the lighting of the walls and the protection of St Botolph's Priory. As important as these ambitious plans are, I am especially proud of our work on inequality. Professor Marmot's review has highlighted the effects of austerity, and the poor have got considerably poorer over the past 11 years. I'm proud of our generous local council tax support provision, for our work with partners in One Colchester, our gold standard customer service and performance of processing council tax and housing benefit claims. I'm proud of us being a living wage authority, ensuring our staff have decent levels of pay so they can lead healthy lives and meet their commitments. Our investment in council housing and our impressive proposals on new community facilities in the St Mark's Community Centre. We have invested in staff resources. Having a qualified OT in our housing team gives us the best chance to progress those disability facility grants, ensuring people have homes that meet their needs and can thrive in. This really is a budget based on hope, Mr Mayor. Turning to the Tories' incoherent back of a fag packet amendments, I have to convey my disappointment. Councillor Dundas, we have welcomed you into the TCB work, and you have attended all the pre-meets and the board meetings as far as I'm aware. And yet today you want to take resources from the budget allocated to develop the development plan document and resource the vital making TCB and the garden community there a success, and divert that to pay for a feasibility study for Middlewick. The people of East Colchester and Wivenhoe will not thank you for this. What you suggest is premature. We need to work with the local people to decide what they want at Middlewick. At the moment, they want it left as it is. And you may have been better telling your MP this and to get him on board with getting the MOD to change their plans. Do the people in the area want a country park? Perhaps we could hear from Councillor Moore. She could share her experience of Cudmore Grove and on an August bank holiday Monday. Country parks have car parks, often visitor centres, toilets, and sometimes cafes. All of that goes towards the upkeep of a country park. Essex has 20 country parks. Some, such as Highwoods, are run by districts and boroughs. Some, such as Cudmore Grove, are run by Essex County Council. I spoke to the portfolio holder in yesterday's County Council meeting. He has responsible for County Hall for country parks. I checked what the position was regarding budgeting these. He confirmed that Essex County Council has no provision in their budget for any new country parks. It seems to me that this authority and the people of Colchester want more biodiversity, and as such, we must decide whether it's a country park or a nature reserve that is right for Middlewick. That actually would give greater protection against future additional development. Mr Mayor, the issue of Middlewick is too important to be used as political football as it is being. The MOD own this site. To retain as much of the site as possible, to protect its biodiversity is what we must achieve. I have full confidence in the local plan committee in steering the discussions to a suitable and correct outcome, but we should not be robbing Peter to pay Paul. The people of East Colchester deserve the funding allocated to resource the very best garden community that we can provide. So I think it is particularly underhanded to try to switch resources earmarked for one part of the town, which already has advanced plans for a garden community, in place to switch resources elsewhere. This pits one area against another, and it really isn't on. With the level of death rates across the country and the wasted money on failed track and trace system, we need to ensure that our bereavement service is as well resourced as possible. The fees and charges have gone through scrutiny and several workshops without question. The increased charge is modest and sets us at a medium level when compared with others. It's pretty poor form, really. And finally, turning to the water quality of Lexton Pond. This may be our responsibility, but officers that are working collaboratively on this issue, an expert opinion has been brought in. But we do have to protect CBC resources to fund statutory and discretionary services and cannot be drawn into funding solutions other organisations have a duty to fund. We may need to try and bring funding in from elsewhere. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, the Labour Group will be supporting this budget. The administration has a plan for the year ahead. Sadly, our opposition has no alternative budget and no alternative plan. They have rushed ideas, thrown them on the table at the last minute, and this is entirely irresponsible. We all want to enhance and support our environment, of course we do, but let's spend time getting this right in the appropriate forum of the Local Planning Committee, where members can debate this fully with the benefit of evidence before them and local views known. Mr. Mayor, we have had the most difficult year imaginable. The budget moves us forward to a place of recovery. It has been thoughtfully and skillfully constructed over a considerable period of time, and I commend it to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Your untimed submission on behalf of the Labour Party. We now move to Councillor Paul Dundas on behalf of the Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Corey for moving the motion to suspend standing orders and allow on-time speaking. I promise I will be done by the time the pubs are open. And indeed, thank you to Councillor King for laying out in some detail the administration's budget, with visual aids this year, and not just our favourite clock. Our embracing of new technology truly knows no bounds. I always listen carefully to what Councillor King says, because although I may not always agree with him, I genuinely can't fault his commitment and dedication to his seemingly inexhaustible list of roles. But before we get to what we disagree with, perhaps we should cover some common ground. I don't think there can be much dissent in this virtual chamber that the past 12 months have been quite extraordinary. It was in fact the budget meeting in February 2020 when this council last met in physical form. I don't think I can be the only one for whom it oddly seems both yesterday and a lifetime ago. But here we are. I would also like to thank Councillor King for the degree of engagement this year and the briefings he has arranged. They have been interesting and informative, but let's be clear, they have mainly been briefings. This is not a collaborative budget, the one constructed by the Cabinet and then justified to councillors. As I said nearly a year ago, the only way you get a joint budget is through a joint administration across the parties, and we do not have one. At no point have we been invited to sit down and give direct input before the fundamental decisions have been taken. This is the administration's budget, no one else's. We are not going to write it for you. If you don't think you're up to it, you know what to do. I am, though, of course, fully aware that there has been an ever-changing financial picture and assumptions have been a major challenge this year, let alone predicted next year. I think I've used the expression nailing jelly to the wall in some discussions, and I stick by that, and I can't actually think of a better description. Nonetheless, I don't think we as a council should be asking for any sympathy. The challenges of this council and authorities in general are of nothing compared to the challenges millions of individuals and businesses throughout our country, and indeed the wider world, have faced and had to deal with. We are frankly one of the lucky ones, and I think if we bleat about it, we would rightly get very short shrift from the public. Now, government help and money was mentioned, and let's be clear, it's been huge. Billions have gone to local authorities, £36 billion to be precise in health, and many extra millions to this authority with considerable amounts still to come. I'm happy to list some of them. There's 80,000 first tranche, 1.95 million second tranche, 320,000 third tranche, 570,000 fourth tranche, 990,000 additional tranche, 90,000 compliance and enforcement grant, 170,000 reopening of high street safety grant, 120,000 next step accommodation programme, 2.17 million sales fees and charges compensation scheme. If we include grants to Colchester businesses, which I happily and genuinely compliment CBC on getting out the door so well, a total of £90 million in the current financial year in extra money for Colchester. The simple truth is each and every time local government has been in need this year, central government have come good. And it doesn't end there. As the Observer will have noticed, there are some also very large amounts, at least £2 million directly, that come to the new financial year, detailed in the budget, and of course the millions of government money in the town deal. But let's talk about the future. Firstly, of course, we are talking about the local government finance settlement, which applies across England. I'm pleased to say the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens backed this settlement. Labour did not vote against it, but credit where credit's due, they did at least make the effort to attend the debate and speak in the Commons. The Liberal Democrats and the Greens did not even attend the debate, speak in the debate, or bother to vote. I can only assume local government issues are not high on their agenda. But to the budget in front of us, we don't, of course, disagree with all of it. As I said, I think that Councillor King in many ways is a pretty sensible person, possibly apart from his choice of political party. And parts of this are a perfectly sensible budget. I don't want to speak too long on the amendments, as others are doing so, but I disagree. I think they are perfectly sensible, and we've actually tried to write them in a non-political way. And I actually hope sensible councillors from across the chamber will support them. I think the decision to increase bereavement charges 3 times the rate of inflation is just misjudged. If you want to look back on your time as a councillor and ask yourself what you did during the pandemic, and the answer is, I voted to put up bereavement charges 3 times inflation because I thought it was a really good idea. Then take a good look at yourself and think again. On the local plan of Middlewick, as Councillor Barber has stated, we currently have a plan A. People, seemingly even the ones who voted for it in the first place, claim not to like plan A. I do not like plan A. In life, if you have a plan A you do not like, then you need to find a plan B which everyone accepts because it is better. The amendment is simply saying, let's commit some resources to finding a plan B. It makes no commitments as to what may turn out to be possible. And all I'll say is really, if you vote against that, you are endorsing the plan A and saying you are not willing to even explore alternatives. Now, Councillor Young asked a question earlier whether a country park was the appropriate way forward and said this council listens. Well, here's your chance. Listen. Answer your own question and find out if a country park is the appropriate way forward. Unless you do this, how do you know? Now, the money is there. We talk to officers as well. We have checked. It does not need to come from tendering borders. We have done our research. And let's be honest, planning the future shape of our borough and exploring ideas and opportunities is exactly what this authority should be doing and using resources to do. If we don't do that, what is the point of us? What's our role? So, differences on the budget. Now, of course, the budget is obviously heavily constrained by those in the past. That's the nature of it. And I have to say, I think it is affected by some bad decisions over past years. And I think the administration has been slightly boxed in due to past wrong budgets. Undoubtedly, I think possibly the biggest illustration of this is the decision to raise council tax by the maximum amount. Now, the justification for this is no doubt the challenges faced this year. But let's look at some of the inconvenient truths. Just how many people had a 2 to 3% pay rise this year? 3 million people, as I speak, are on furlough, many only receiving 80% of their normal pay. How many SMEs have seen a 2 to 3% revenue increase this year? The very simple is very few. Yet here we are, putting up our council tax by 2.5% when inflation is below 1%. It is a kick in the teeth for thousands of households throughout the borough who have seen their income cut. And here is the other inconvenient truth. Other councils have managed not to. Essex County Council have managed to freeze their core council tax without cutting services. Our neighbours in Braintree have done the same. Of course, I have to say this, it is notable that they are Conservative control councils and have been for some time. The reason they're able to do this whilst maintaining the vital services their residents rely on is because of many years of good long-term financial planning, which means they have the resources and financial capacity to recognise that this is an exceptional year and they're going to cut their residents a break. Colchester is either unwilling or unable to do this because we've had 13 years of merry-go-round administration, which has never had a long-term plan, and chopped and changed as they've argued amongst themselves, as I suspect they've been doing today, often appearing to prioritise hanging on to their jobs above all else. Now, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate this is on time, but I don't want to abuse that privilege and go through the entire budget line by line. I have done that privately, and people who know me, and I think you've got to know me well enough by now to know that that's the kind of thing I'll do. And I have a 27-page spreadsheet on my right-hand screen here, which lists out what we do differently. But if I list it all, we'll still be here next week. We will take that to the electorate and we will be ready to implement in June should we have the opportunity. But I've also just want to point out, if I may, one more area which I think demonstrates the very confused nature of the council's policies, and that is actually around the proposed car parking charges. I'll be honest, it's never really clear to me what their direction is on this. The Liberal Democrats in particular don't really seem to know what their policy is. Some claim to be in favour of more sustainable transport solutions, but others just seem to spend their whole time moaning that they can't drive around the borough as they once could if these solutions are implemented. Only this week, we have a letter in the local paper from a Lib Dem candidate calling for more roads to be built, and that we should encourage short journeys into the town by car with free car parking. Is that their policy? I don't know, perhaps somebody can enlighten us. Now, the budget does see substantial rises in car parking fees across the borough, notably in the town centre. Now, of course, we could have a debate about whether that in itself is wise when we are going to spend the year encouraging people back into the town. But I do appreciate the revenue aspects, and I do also appreciate the issues around encouraging behavioural change. So it is not the rise itself that I have the main issue with, but this. Every airline, every train company, every hotel, every car hire company, bus company, even many pubs and restaurants when we have them again, recognises that to maximise revenue, you use pricing structures to alter customer behaviour and maximise use of your assets. It's Economics 101 and something people are taught in the first week of a GCSE economics course. So, flying in the face of every economic theory out there, we are doing away with our varied price structure and having a 24/7 blanket pricing. This now means it costs the same to park on a sunny, packed Saturday afternoon than a damp Tuesday morning. It's a step backwards. We need a proper structure that is designed not in isolation, but in conjunction with other transport, such as park and ride and buses, and demand. It will mean no incentive for people to come into the town when car parks are quiet and the roads less busy during the weekday, but encourage them to simply come when they want, maybe on a Saturday afternoon when the car parks are full and the road's stationary. How is this progressive? It is one of the most regressive policies I've ever seen. So, Mr. Mayor, in summary, we do not support this budget. It is symptomatic of a council which has no real long-term plans, is unsympathetic to the plight of residents, and frankly, deeply unsensitive in some areas. It also, clearly, if they don't accept the amendments, is not a listening budget either. It is a compromise budget drawn up by two political parties who agree on nothing apart from keeping themselves in a job. It contains some fairly inept economic theory and will do little for Colchester in the long term. It may well be voted through this evening, but who knows whether it will ever be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dundas. We've now got Councillor Gerard Oxford on behalf of the Independent Group.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope you can hear me all right. Yes, my group have been very pleased in the last 12 months about the process in which that has been carried out. We've been involved by the administration, along with other opposition groups, all the way through. Indeed, we have taken the opportunity to highlight ideas that we have and also things that we are questioning. And we've done that throughout the year. And some of them we've managed to get altered and others we have not. And that's the means of negotiation. I just think that the whole idea of having everybody contributing to, having the opportunity to, whether you choose to contribute is another matter. We chose to do so. For instance, we've been working on a scheme for a community centre for over 6 years. And in order to achieve that, in the past, or currently, the only mechanism to do that is Section 106 agreements. Section 106 agreements have brutally failed Highwoods for the duration of the build here since 1980. The only way we could get forward to make sure that the Section 106 would pay out is by getting negotiating with the Cabinet to actually capital fund the build and recover the 106 monies as and when they become available. This we've been able to achieve as part of this budget process. We also highlighted about the parking charges at the Highwoods Country Park, but we also noted that it's been many years where there has been no increase at that site, and correspondence with our residents is they're realistic that that's to expect some rise there. We've also highlighted about the garden waste partway through. We were really against the garden waste increases and the proposals there. Council listened, set up a task and finish group, and members that were on there decided that that shouldn't be moved forward with, and the administration removed it from the budget. So I mean, we're disappointed that the locality budget has been halved. We always make good use of our locality budget on Highwoods. Indeed, this year we funded 4 groups that have been helping vulnerable individuals and families during this pandemic, and it's been put to very good use, and sadly we won't have the same amount next year should this budget be approved. So what I would like to say as well, because obviously it's been mentioned about Salmon Creme, and it'd be remiss of me not to mention something about that, because it's very dear to Beverly and my hearts. Beverly was portfolio holder of Salmon Creme for 10 years. She wanted to remind the council of how precious asset we have in the cemetery, and a place for quiet contemplation, remembering loved ones, even more important now. It has always won numerous Green Flag awards for the work done in protecting and enhancing habitats for plants, birds, animals, and such habitat. It was always her privilege to be portfolio holder for Salmon Creme. The dedicated staff there, Penny, Susie and co, are second to none. They treat residents during a time of grief and with dignity and sympathy. We are lucky to have them and should not underestimate their commitment, not only to the council, but our residents, especially during COVID. Go on, our cemetery has won numerous awards. Sorry, there we go. Penny has been involved in the proposed increases throughout. She negotiated that original amount would be too high, that she felt that this particular percentage was acceptable, given that Colchester is the second lowest of the 6 nearest towns. Braintree's is £999, ours is £788, Chelmsford 793, Havering 955, Nacton is the only one cheaper on 775, and Southend is 825. So obviously we would have been really red rag to a bull had it have been too high, that Penny and the team didn't feel that they could deliver. But they are comfortable and confident that they can deliver that. And one other thing as well, in the last 10 years, something that was introduced by Beverly was free funerals for under 18s. That was never in before. And that's still there now, free funerals for under 18s. That's a fantastic thing. You know, if a family, parents lose a child, there's nothing worse than that. And so she just wanted to say that, because she's extremely protective of Sem and Crem. So we didn't want anything being said against them in any way, shape or form. But the Highwards Independent Group will be supporting this budget tonight. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oxford. You're the last of the untimed speakers. So we'll now go in order of hands going up. And we've got Councillor Andrew Ellis first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's because Middlewick is so special and environmentally important that the Conservative group have tabled this budget amendment. As for Councillor King's remarks about politics, I suggest councillors need to understand they can't vote for development on the Wick and then stand wringing their hands and looking glum about it for the newspapers in front of the Rangers side. Be honest, own your decisions and work with us for a more positive outcome. We have to accept the fact that the coalition administration voted to take the local plan forward with a housing allocation for Middlewick. Unless the inspector removes the site from section 2 of the plan in April, the MOD will be expecting to build up to 1,000 homes on the Wick. Everything this administration currently says shows that they have effectively thrown in the towel, content that the allocation is for half that originally suggested. My group thinks this is a mistake, and as Councillor Dundas says, we need a plan B. Our amendment will afford the opportunity for one. We're not alone. Those that attended the last local plan committee will have seen a number of eloquent speakers making the case for doing something different at Middlewick. This administration should have learned by now that they ignore residents' voices at their peril, especially those with a degree of expertise. I can't sit here and say that development somewhere in the area of the Ranges won't happen. To do so would be misleading, but my group won't stand accused of not doing everything in our power to try to create a country park or similar at the Wick. I've offered councillors meetings for some intergroup brainstorming on the issue, but we've never had one. Colleagues, whatever our political tribe, it's precisely issues like this one that should bring us together to work collaboratively for Colchester. If we want to do something meaningful for Middlewick, it's time we had a really honest conversation together and with resident groups too. My group's door is wide open. And on that note, fortunately others have been open to dialogue. Many of you will be aware that one of the most vocal critics of the Middlewick proposals is our High Steward, Sir Bob Russell. I took the liberty of telephoning him this morning to explain our amendment and our thinking. And I'm delighted to report that he said it was something he would support. And he asked me to urge councillors across the chamber from all political persuasions to support it too. I can quote one particular sentence. He said, "This is a modest amendment in terms of the financial aspect, but it's a massive amendment in terms of what it could help to achieve, a country park in South Colchester. It deserves the support of all who say they are opposed to the loss of Middlewick, to an urban sprawl stretching from Mersey Road to Old Heath." They are Sir Bob's words, not mine, but I agree with them. He reminded me, as he often does, that as a young councillor, he was one of the leaders in opposing a huge development planned to the north of the railway line. The result today is the southern slopes of the Highwards Country Park. He said he would dearly love to see a repeat of Highwards at Middlewick. And if people truly want to save Middlewick, our budget amendment takes us towards achieving that outcome. Colleagues, I urge you, take a leaf out of Sir Bob's book, set aside tribal politics and support the Middlewick amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis. We now have the Leader of the Council, Councillor Mark Corey.
Thank you, Mayor. This budget delivers for the people of Colchester at an extremely tough time for all of us. The budget delivers for every resident and for every business that calls this place home. And this budget delivers on a clear strategic vision for Colchester. That is tackling the climate challenge and leading sustainability, creating safe and healthy and active communities, delivering homes for the people who need them, and growing a fair economy so everyone benefits, and celebrating our heritage and culture. The budget tackles the climate challenge and leads on sustainability by growing the woodland and biodiversity project across the borough and banning harmful glyphosate weed killer. It invests £4.4 million into greening our housing stock. It decarbonises Rowan House and reduces air pollution with e-cargo bikes and air quality projects. This budget creates a safer and healthier communities for all through our COVID pandemic response, working with partners to protect the most vulnerable, and helping the NHS to carry out testing centres and the vaccination centre up at the stadium. The Northern Gateway Sports Park will be completed and open for all abilities, and installing new state-of-the-art CCTV across the town centre protects us all when visiting. This budget delivers homes for people that need them, 350 new affordable homes, building sheltered accommodation that's fit for purpose for a happy home for our elderly residents, and reducing homelessness due to the compassionate and effective strategy that delivers results in Colchester. This budget grows a fair economy so everyone benefits, providing a generous local council tax support scheme helping the lowest earners and stretched families, and providing COVID support payments to the most vulnerable and those out of work, as well as rapidly supporting businesses with the grants they need and deserve. Tackling the causes of inequality is key to this budget too, and we work with our partners in One Colchester collectively to make a better Colchester for all. And lastly, the budget celebrates our heritage and culture, helping to deliver the successful Mercury redevelopment scheme and the public realm around it, highlighting our heritage through the Town Deal project, and a new cultural strategy supporting Colchester's flourishing creative industries and the new Queen Street depot. In these difficult times, this is the vision and the action that people need. If I were a Conservative voter, I'd be disappointed with the 3 budget lines put forward this evening. Number 1, they are last minute, 24 hours before. Number 2, they're irresponsible after such an open and consultative budget process. They're changes that could threaten the whole budget that haven't been talked through. And thirdly, they're incoherent and offer no vision at all. This administration's budget is for the future of Colchester. The Conservatives' 3 budget lines are simply for a future leaflet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Our next speaker is Councillor Mark Gocher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to, first of all, show my appreciation for all the people who work for the council that have done such a great job over the last year, and for all of the work that the administration, especially Councillor King, have put into this budget. There's a lot of positive things in it. A number of points I'd like to make. First of all, about the amendments. Could Councillor King please confirm whether it is true or not that the bereavement cost or bereavement service charge increase is 3 times the rate of inflation, as stated in the amendment? Because I'm hearing different things. So can that be confirmed in the summer, please? Now, in terms of Middlewick, this is my main thing I want to talk about. I think we should be doing everything we can to minimise development on Middlewick. This is an area that matters a lot to people who live around it, because it is such an urban area around it. It's surrounded by urban development, and it's their oasis of green space. It is also rich with different wildlife and habitat. And I have no need to remind people again of the crisis that this country is in terms of wildlife decline. 40% of species in serious decline since the 1970s. And we cannot just not seize on every possible chance and opportunity there might be to minimise development on this site. Personally, I would agree with those people who are saying that they would prefer a nature reserve. But we are where we are, and we need to explore the alternatives to 1,000 houses. So if a country park is a viable alternative, let's explore it. And as far as I can see, that's what the amendment is getting at, exploring it. I would like the nature reserve aspect to be explored in this as well, if the money is diverted and the amendment is passed, which I will be supporting that amendment. I do regret maybe some of the way in which these amendments have been introduced at the last minute without maybe discussion with the administration beforehand, because I would like to have had a more consensual discussion about Middlewick. But I will be supporting the Middlewick amendment because we must be exploring every possibility there is to minimise development on Middlewick ranges because of the not just the climate emergency, but the biodiversity and wildlife emergency that we face in this country. The one thing that stands out in my mind at one of the consultations on Middlewick, there was just an ordinary mother at the consultation, 2 small children, and she was in tears, desperately trying to explain to the MOD people there why it was so needed, that site. So I will be supporting that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gocher. The next speaker is Councillor. Apologies. Thank you, Councillor Gocher. Next speaker is Councillor Higgins, please. Teresa Higgins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I hope you'll indulge me a little bit. This is my last full council meeting, so after 22 years service plus my husband's 14, we have done over 30 years service to this council. So I hope you'll indulge me in a couple of bits and pieces. Just to say that I'm speaking for the budget as presented by Councillor King. There are excellent things in this budget. There's so much detail, and it does sadden me that the opposition have only put in 3 amendments. So obviously they agree with most of the budget. You know, it's the retort we always got at full council in County Hall when I was a county councillor, that, oh dear, you've only put some of these things in, so you must agree with most of the budget, which is obviously what they do. Now, Councillor Oxford has spoken very well about the bereavement services, so I won't add any more to that, just to say that they are fantastic down there. The lake is a different situation, but I do believe that nature takes its own course, as it has done with the river, and it will sort itself out. As regards Middlewick, I am not going to vote for the amendment because I think other things need to be explored. 2 things or 3 things to say on that. 1, the housing targets are not set by the Borough Council. They are set by the government, which is a Conservative government at the moment. And we have to take our share of housing and allocate the houses as to where we see fit. Now, I don't want to see housing on Middlewick. I would much rather see a nature reserve. A country park is not necessarily the right thing because a country park, as others have explained, will have car parks, cafes, toilets, and all sorts of bits and pieces. If we really want to keep it as a wildlife place, we need to have it as a nature park or designated as an SSI. So I can't vote for the Conservative amendment on that particular bit either. But Mr. Mayor, the other thing...
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. A country park doesn't have to have a car park. Several of the speakers of this evening have said country park has.
Councillor Ellis.
What's the point of order?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Order. What is the point of order, please?
Okay, the point of order is that they're saying things which simply aren't true, Mr. Mayor. That's not you are making it up.
Say exactly the same thing about Councillor Ellis's comments.
I apologise, but I've got to rule here that actually everybody is entitled to their 3 minutes. They may believe what they speak, or they may not, but they are entitled to speak it. Thank you. Councillor Higgins, continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Country parks come with all sorts of bits and pieces. I'm not saying they have car parks, but some do. All right, so that's where we are. So I'm not going to support the amendment on that one because I do think we ought to look at it in a totally different way. But I will support the budget because there are some fantastic things in there. You know, for the limited amount of money that we get from central government, which I think in the past was something like £12 million, now has gone right down to about 100,000 Yes, we've had extra money for the pandemic, but that's gone precisely to deal with stuff for the pandemic. I think this council is doing some fantastic stuff. And over the years that I've been involved with it, I was, Mr. Mayor, the very first female cabinet member, and I'm now ending my service to this council as a cabinet member. And I'm proud to have been there. I've done some fantastic work, and I'd like to thank all the officers that I have served with, you know, going right back to John Cobley, the town clerk at the time, to Adrian Pritchard now, who's been there for a long time, and all the other officers who have done fantastic jobs in the very difficult circumstances. And just if there are members of the public watching, we as the councillors set the vision and then we ask our officers to do it. Now, sometimes people complain about what the officers do, but actually we set that vision and we ask the officers to do it. And under very, very difficult circumstances, they have done that vision. So, Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting the budget as not amended. And just for my family, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Councillor Higgins. And as you say, you and your husband have served this town well. I wish you a happy retirement. The next full council meeting, of course, will be after the elections. Anyway, our next speaker tonight is Councillor Lynn Barton. Our next speaker tonight is Councillor Lynn Barton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to focus on what this administration's recently achieved regarding our heritage and culture. Setting up the cross-party task and finish group to look at heritage and tourism was a successful move. In partnership, we achieved the following investments to our heritage: lighting up the best section of the Roman Wall, lighting up our castle, developing our Heritage Explorer website, commissioning commissioning the Gosbecks Park feasibility study, working with partners to repair and protect our Roman church site. That's just a few of the highlights, a few positives I thought we might need. And it's pleasing to see the continued prioritising and celebrating our heritage and culture in this budget. But I do appreciate times are difficult, but I feel that working with partners, we can build on our successes. And I was pleased to hear some of the plans outlined by Councillor Julie Young earlier. But I'm pleased to see that we're funding a Roman circus consultation, that we found money to give a grant to improve the facilities at the venue. I think that's really important. We're looking to light and improve the setting at St Bottles, and we're looking at signage and interpretation panels. So I am delighted to see this continued commitment to our heritage in this budget, and I will be supporting it this evening. But Mr. Mayor, before I finish, I did feel that must mention the collaborative working with the Mercury Theatre. This is to be applauded. The redevelopment being carried out at this moment in time with a total investment of 11.3 million, of which 600,000 has been donated by local residents and businesses during COVID, has demanded much skill from both Colchester Borough Council and the theatre itself. I believe, well, I know many other theatres in the country undergoing capital projects have collapsed completely, but with our combined expertise, and we have superb officers working on this, and our commitment, this project is now near completion. It's going to be a huge boost to the culture and economy of Colchester. It's an unbelievable achievement given the circumstances, and I do want to congratulate all those involved. So from my point of view, this budget definitely deserves support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, thank you very much, Councillor Barton. So you are followed by Councillor Lee Scordis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and everyone. I hope everyone is doing well after the last meeting we had, another lockdown. I would first like to thank Councillor King and Councillor Corey, as well as all the officers, for their sound management of the budget over the years in their role as resources cabinet holder. It's left us in a strong position to face the challenges of the pandemic, despite huge cuts over 10 years. So it's never been an easy task. We have defended vital services that other councils have cut. An example is One Colchester, that has done a fantastic job of protecting the most vulnerable in Colchester during the pandemic. I wish to move on about Middlewick. Middlewick is one of the last remaining green spaces in the south of Colchester. It's one of the few sites that has been left to nature. That's why I was so angry when the Ministry of Defence sold Colchester out by planning to sell this piece of land with the intention of building 2,000 homes. The sale itself makes no logical sense. It's used 4 times a week by the army, as well as for night operations. It simply comes down to money. I was even more intrigued to see that Councillor Barber has had a Damascene revelation as he's moved from calling Middlewick a brown site and wishing to build on here instead of West Tay, to wishing to make it a country park. While Councillor Barber's change of heart is certainly welcome, I feel the motion is one of opportunism. Firstly, a nature reserve that would protect and enhance the biodiversity would be more welcome. And I was close to amending Councillor Barber's amendment to this. Country park is always great, but it means tarmacking over large portions for toilets, car park, sometimes a play park, while the cost can be quite substantial. And as far as Councillor Ellis's comments, I'm not aware of any country park in Essex without a large car park. With a car
Point
park
of order,
traffic,
point of
already
order.
over-
Can I inform Councillor Scordis that if you'd like to come to Prettygate to Westlands Country Park, this is a country park with no buildings, no toilet, no cafe, no car park. That's what a country park can be.
Thank you, Councillor Lissamore, but yes, we now carry on with
Not sure that's a point of order, but never even heard of it. So there you go. So with car park comes more traffic to our already overburdened roads in South Colchester. However, it's occurred to me that we do not own this piece of land. It's still owned by the MOD and will likely be sold to the developer. We can spend all the money we wish on a feasibility study, but we do not own the land or control what is built on here yet. This also offers false hope to residents who feel passionately about the subject. This is not the way to protect Middlewick. We know that whatever happens with the local plan, the MOD will put in planning permission for the site anyway, with nothing to lose and everything to gain. This in turn is not aided by a planning system that for far too long has favoured developers as the government looks to build 300,000 homes a year. Now, I hope that the council can work towards a nature reserve to protect biodiversity on Middlewick and allowing future generations to enjoy this wonderful piece of land. A more prudent route, if Councillor Barber wishes to save the land, would be to put the pressure on our Conservative MP, who for some reason agrees with the reason for the sale given by the MOD. Now, I don't recall Councillor Barber signing our petition on this, but I believe it's still online, so he's more than welcome to sign and share that tonight. The simple fact is that if you stop the sale, you stop the build, as well as providing adequate training resources for our armed forces.
Thank you very much, Councillor Scordis. We're now followed by Councillor, well, it should be Roger Buston, but Councillor Buston will be speaking later when he sums up. So Councillor Adams Fox, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And this is the budget that delivers on our priorities for Colchester, for a borough where there's genuinely affordable housing to rent for local people, where we invest in a vibrant town centre, where we protect our environment, our heritage and culture, and where we support our local businesses and jobs for people in Colchester. The last year has been like no other, and while many of us have been confined to our homes for long periods, the council and its partners have continued to deliver vital services for local people. I would like to start by paying tribute to all our staff and those of Colchester Borough Homes and our One Colchester partners for all their work over the last year. This is a budget that will continue to ensure we support our local community in the year ahead. It will see an additional £40 million invested in our housing programme and new genuinely affordable council homes for rent, built for local people, and our 100 Homes programme, buying back homes for local families. This will be the first year for decades that we will see a net addition to the number of council houses in the borough. Our plans for delivering 350 new affordable homes are on track, and the current collection of new homes will be the most energy efficient we have constructed as a council. We will also continue to tackle rough sleeping, enforcing good standards in the private rented sector, and helping people who need adaptations to remain in their homes, and investment in new sheltered accommodation at Alfreda House. Our multi-million pound investment in greening our council homes will see us installing the latest green technology, not just talking on the sidelines, but real action on the climate emergency. And all this is about reducing inequality and delivering on our commitment to a fairer offer to all Colchester residents. We're investing in communities, including supporting local groups and the establishment of a new community centre in Highwoods, with new state-of-the-art sports facilities at the Northern Gateway Sports Park, and investment in our town centre, as we've heard, the rebuilding and reopening of the Mercury Theatre later this year. On Middlewick, I know how much people from my community value the space for walking, for exercising, and when the MOD aren't firing, for the calm and for the nature. I know my community well, which is why I think Councillor Barber is so misguided. First, he was for more housing on the Wick. Now he is for everyone coming to South Colchester to visit a country park. He's never for those things in his own ward. The Tories don't care about our part of Colchester, which is why they're happy to see their own government sell the land and then blame it on the local council. I won't take it and I won't vote for his amendment. And if the Tories are so intent on building a country park in South Colchester, why didn't councillors Bentley, Lissamore and Jowers put it in the Essex County Council budget yesterday? Because they don't really care. They're just political point scoring. I'd much prefer to see unallocated land protected as a nature reserve, like Bourne Valley or the Hythe Lagoons. These areas provide better biodiversity than a manufactured country park. The Conservatives have provided no alternative budget, just uncosted, incoherent and last-minute amendments that show they have no vision of their own for Colchester. This is a budget that delivers for the people of Colchester, supporting our community as we begin to recover from coronavirus, helping to tackle inequality and providing opportunities for the years ahead. I encourage all councillors to support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fox. The next councillor up is Councillor Sue Lissamore, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd very much like to invite Councillor Scordis to Westlands Country Park in Prettygate. I'm sorry he's never heard of it. It is a little gem and I feel very passionate about it because it is a fine example of what a country park can actually be. It has no car park, it has no cafe, it has no buildings at all, it has no visitor centre. But what it does have is a fantastic backing of local residents because they were the ones that formed it. When it opened, we set up with former councillor Beverly Davis a residents group and we applied for funding and we got funding of over £140,000 to put into this country park what residents wanted, not what I wanted, not what Councillor Davis wanted, not what the council wanted, but what residents wanted. This is what can be done with a country park. I'd like to just mention Councillor Fox when he says that we don't care about their side of the borough. Well, Councillor Scordis has just said he's never heard of Westlands Country Parks. He's obviously never been there, so he doesn't care about that. He's not looked at examples. I was actually at the Wick today because I did the Colchester orbital route and I cycled right past it, heard the firing that was going on. I'm passionate about this and I'm very angry because residents need to be heard and we need to allocate funding so that they are heard and that we get what we want, they want on there. We've got play equipment on ours. They might want play equipment, they might not. We put sensitive planting in, they might not want that, but yes, they might. But that's what a country park can be. It can be whatever residents want. Now put your money where your mouth is and agree to this funding to look into what residents want for that area.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lissamore. The next speaker is Councillor Chris Pearson.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I was having difficulty with the mute button. Just in terms of the budget this evening, I know it's unfortunate that we're having to raise the precept, but I just want to draw our Conservative colleagues' attention to the fact that although Essex County Council may not be raising its general rate, it is raising the adult social care precept. And the Conservative Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner is raising the precept by 5%. So our precept increase is not unreasonable this evening. I just want to speak on the political posturing, though, that's coming from the Conservative group around Middlewick. Councillor Barber and all of his colleagues are fully aware that the MOD is speculatively submitting this piece of land for development and has been doing for several years now. It's quite clear that there is an alternative, and that alternative is that the MOD doesn't sell that land. A nature reserve would be far better than a country park on that site. So I would just ask Councillor Barber to join with local Labour councillors in asking the MOD to take the sale of Middlewick off the table. I would ask our Conservative MP for Colchester to use his best endeavours to take the sale of Middlewick off the table. I would trust that every Conservative candidate in the coming local elections asks Conservative government to take the sale of Middlewick off the table. Plan B, Councillor Dundas, is straightforward. Take the sale of Middlewick off the table and make the site a nature reserve.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pearson. The next speaker is Christopher Arnold, Councillor Christopher Arnold, who I believe may also be attending his last meeting.
Certainly participating in my last debate, thank you, Mr. Mayor, but I was hopeful there might be some other occasion to speak later in the year. I'm a little surprised, not that far from where I live and even closer to where my granddaughter lives in Mile End Road, there's a huge open space, 150 hectares of open space, which is mostly woodland, open spaces, a couple of lakes, it's full of wildfowl. Looking at the council's own website, I see there are over 40 species of birds which are regularly identified there. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sort of go through the entire list because it's owned by us. It's Highwoods Country Park, and you look at it, and it's got a very small car park. It's got a very discreet visitor centre just off Turner Road. It's got a couple of playgrounds which are largely based on wood, but overwhelmingly it's wonderful open space. It's grass this time of year, it's mud which some of the kids love and some of them don't, and it's trees, hectare upon hectare of trees. It's an extraordinary place. Now, I don't think any of the councillors I've heard speaking against the Middlewick amendment tonight have ever been to Highwoods Country Park, because they're talking about acres of car parking. We don't have acres of car parking. What I would love to see in Colchester is the space that I played on as a teenager, because I had friends who lived on Old Heath Road, and I had friends who lived on Mersey Road, and we used to meet there. So I've known it for 50 years. I don't think we particularly want, the people around there particularly want a nature reserve, but I think what they want is somewhere where they can do what I did as a teenager. In other words, they have access to it, and it offers that huge diversity of habitats and opportunities for recreation that we have in Highwoods Country Park. Highwoods Country Park is not the sort of desecrated area that I've heard described over and over again by administration group councillors. It's a wonderful place. And just like Westlands Country Park, it seems that those administration councillors have never heard of it. Westlands is great. You know, as this council's representative on the Corey Environmental Trust, I was the one who directed £30,000 worth of investment in the play equipment there. But the play equipment is only on a tiny part of it. And I have to say that was under a scheme set up by central government, Kenneth Clarke, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, the initial landfill tax scheme. And it's been going strong for years, that has. So to administration group councillors who've spoken against the Middlewick Amendment, I would say try and get out a bit more, get into our two wonderful open spaces, which are not funded by the County Council. They belong to the residents of Colchester, and we look after that tremendous thing, Highwoods Country Park, of which apparently Bob Russell spoke so warmly this morning. We've got a great one in the north of Colchester. Let's go for one in the south of Colchester as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Arnold. Next speaker, Councillor Dave Harris.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, all. To quote the Mayor's chaplain at the start of this meeting, she said to use courtesy, truth, and mutual respect. And I'm going to do all those three things in what I'm going to say now. I wanted to say thank you very much to the team of officers at the council, Councillor King and the whole team that have sorted out this budget in very, very challenging times, aren't they? We've had a heck of a year, and it's almost impossible to see how you could have done any better with all the officers and the volunteers, everybody else that you've had to do better than that. So well done. But I'm going to follow some of the lead of my colleagues and other councillors that want to talk about Middlewick. It's on my doorstep, and I wouldn't I? I want to say very clearly that for me, the environmental experts have already been heard at the local plan meeting last, where people spoke about the environment there and how important, and these people were from the Friends of Middlewick, not enemies of ours, not enemies of mine, and they want to ensure that the nature reserve is kept in that environment. The £50,000, Mr. Mayor, for me, I won't say it's a con job, but I will say it's a smoke and mirrors. If you think that £50,000 survey on a land we do not own, and I'll say that again, we do not own, the MOD government does. If you think £50,000 is going to show up anything different, that we should have a nature reserve there, you're conning yourself. So for me, the idea of that nature reserve is great. It's only
point of explanation, Mr. Mayor.
Carry on, Mr. Mayor. I'm so sorry. The idea of a nature.
It's a feasibility study.
Andrew, can you please wait for the mayor to call you when you want to make
Excuse
a point of
me,
order?
councillors. Somebody has interrupted, so Councillor Ellis, you have to make absolutely clear what your point of explanation is, briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Harris is saying that we're suggesting that £50,000 is spent on a survey. It's not at all. We're suggesting that £50,000 is spent on a feasibility study to see how best to sort out the site.
That's fine. Thank you. Yes, if Councillor Harris read the amendment, he would have been able to see that, wouldn't he? Councillor Harris, would you like to continue? Thank you.
And I would thank you for the interruption. I didn't really need it because I had read the amendment. What I'm on about is the fact that the MOD own the land, definitely. And as far as I'm convinced, the MOD to take that site off the table, that's it. So it's like any other landowner. The landowner decides what to do. They're going to put in an application for housing, and we've got to stop that. And I appeal wholeheartedly to all councillors of all political persuasions to tell the MOD to take that off the table now and let us, the residents here, my friends, my neighbours, my residents, Friends of Middlewick, to stop the sale of Middlewick. Take it off the table. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. We now have Councillor Mike Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm coming at this from the direction of this being doing what is right and proper. I apologise about the voice. I can't do anything about that. I would remind people at the last full council, I asked Councillor Goss if there was any money in the budget to provide £90,000 for a fixed play area park in the Saints or anywhere else in the borough, come to that. And I was told by Councillor Goss, there is no money in the budget now or going forward. I therefore accepted that, as much as it grieves me, I accepted that situation. I therefore want to back a budget that maximises the benefit for the people of Colchester, not just one section. I personally could have put myself in a situation where I could have delivered a surprise amendment this evening to get my money to provide equipment in the Saints. I haven't done that. I've done what is right and fair and proper and what is going to benefit the maximum number of people in Colchester, which is the budget which is being set out by Councillor King. That's what I'm going to do. I will not be supporting the amendments. I should be supporting the budget that delivers the maximum benefit for the people of Colchester. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hogg, and I hope you recover soon. The next speaker is Councillor Martin Warnes.
Thank you, Mayor. I wish to support the budget proposals before us this evening, proposals that are the result of amiable attempts to reach across the aisle and reach common accord despite the woeful participation in the budget workshops by opposition councillors. The budget before us demonstrates strong management in the face of a rampant pandemic coming on the back of 10 years of austerity, a period in which progressive councillors amongst us have protected services that others would have cut. It's a budget that continues our housing investment programme for those most in need, focuses on future policy attention in tackling inequalities that were already apparent long before the pandemic struck, that continues to invest in our communities, our town, and will provide high standard new sporting facilities. Yet we also have before us this evening late and incoherent amendments that are not fully costed, and instead, or rather should I say, what we have is sorry, Mayor, I'll try again. Sorry, Mayor, I've lost my train and I'm struggling to try and stay fluent. Okay, so I'll try again. Instead, we have Johnny come lately back of the fag packet amendments at a time when both business and residents need us to know that we've got their backs. Take Middlewick, a large open space adjacent to the ward that I jointly represent. We have an amendment before us that does nothing to get the MOD's proposal taken off the table, this being the best way to protect the nature habitat on Middlewick. Rather, the proposal for a country park would see the natural habitat put under greater strain, with additional carbon on already overused roads that neighbour Middlewick. Instead of supporting my own and my colleagues' call to take Middlewick off the table, Councillor Barber has brought forward an opportunistic amendment that would see this council in straitened times spend £50,000 on a feasibility study for land we don't own. And if a country park were to be taken forward, would see parts of the Wick tarmac over for a car park and would see many more boots walking over the flora and fauna on this much valued and tranquil piece of land in the south of Colchester. So rather than bring empty gesture politics before the council, I would ask that he withdraws his amendment and supports calls to get MOD plans taken off the table and call upon his own MP and government to gift the land to the people of Colchester as a nature reserve to be used in perpetuity for the residents of Colchester and concentrate on the other many sites they have at their disposal and are more easily developed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Warnes. We next have Councillor Luxford Vaughan, please.
Good evening, councillors. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I thought it was a pretty obvious decision to be made that we support the budget. But I've listened to the debate, and I can honestly tell you that I don't make my decisions based on party lines, as you all are annoyed to find out. And I'm concerned that we need to be quite grown up about the Middlewick. Obviously, the other two I wouldn't support at all. The Middlewick proposal, because at the end of the day, none of us have any influence whatsoever on whether or not the MOD sell this land. That decision will happen. I suspect. I don't know, but we can't change that. Which means, because it's in our section 2, it's going to go to hearing. And by the time we get to hearing, as we know with section 1, it's the inspector's decision. Now, if the inspector, I'm just looking at it from my experience of being at hearing and listening to the tendering one, if the inspector didn't think that building at East Colchester wasn't an environmental travesty and that he believed the SA was correctly done, then I don't really see there's any hope for Middlewick. Now, that aside, I suppose I have 2 questions which I'd like addressed in the summing up, if it's at all possible. Is, if we don't have any choice and this is what's going to happen, can officers confirm whether or not an allocation of 50,000 would be, feasible in terms of taking the budget away from the East Colchester site without jeopardising what needs to be spent there? And also, is it possible? There's a lot of talk about the country park and car parks and cafes. I don't know. But clearly, I think we probably could all agree that we would like to do something to preserve what is quite an extraordinary environment there. The wording says it's about a feasibility study. Could we change the wording to say a country park or other alternative? So there, I have 2 questions. I'm still undecided, just by the way, but that's the end of what I've got to say.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor. The last speaker we've got in the general debate is Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and be brief. Like Councillor Higgins and Councillor Arnold before me, this is probably my last full council meeting, but I did think the same around this point last year. So who knows what may happen in the coming months. No, I just wanted to speak briefly because in my time on the council, I've had many roles and been on the cabinet and done many other things. And I don't envy the current cabinet for having had their jobs during the past year because it's been unprecedented, the amount of strain, the amount of stress they've been under, the amount of stress the council has been under and our officers have been under has been quite incredible. But during that time, they, and especially Councillor King, have bent over backwards, I think, to actually try and involve as many people as possible in the budget setting process. We've had several workshops, lots of briefings, lots of information shared around to give people the chance to have their say, to actually input into this from very early stages, going right back to just after lockdown. And so I think that's why I'm very disappointed that the opposition are claiming that, oh, we didn't have any chance to have a say, we didn't have any chance to be involved, and suddenly drop a bunch of amendments at the last minute where there's no opportunity for them to be properly scrutinised or properly analysed. And you can't. I don't think that's a responsible way to set a budget, and I don't think it's a responsible way to try and set a budget. And I really, it really does make me worry about them as an opposition if that's the way they think things should be done. That no one should actually have the time to examine things properly. And they're done. So I'll be supporting this budget because I think in these trying times, in these tough times, it is the best. It is what Colchester needs. There's a lot of work gone into it, and I'll be opposing the amendments. And thank you all for the last 13 or 14 years.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow, too, for your efforts. The last speaker is Councillor Tina Bourne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, what a debate we've had, or we're still having, perhaps. I'm minded of something that we tend to always say at this time of the year, that it is up to the administration to put a budget forward and the opposition to also either put a budget forward or put some amendments forward. And, fair play to the Conservatives, they've put some amendments forward. However, you can see by the amount of interruptions tonight that by putting amendments forward at the last possible moment, the 11th hour, that it's very difficult to get a handle on what they actually mean. And I have to commend the Highwoods Independence Group, who are not in the administration anymore, but have taken a full and fair part in the budget preparations over the last year and have, to their credit, badgered and extolled the virtues of their various interests. They are a group of three. They're not backed by an MP. They don't have huge financial gain. They don't even have an office. They don't have shadow portfolio holders, unlike the opposition. And that is afforded to a credible opposition, and because that's the way that put them forward. Sorry, I'll stop, Mr. Mayor, because there are people talking. You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
I apologise. I was being talked over by an officer. Councillor Bourne, continue, please.
Thank you. Now, this is a budget that has been fully prepared and fully costed. And it has been in the papers for some time, even though it has had to reset priorities during the course of the pandemic, with some batches of funding that have come forward and some decisions that we've had to take during the pandemic. It really does, for us in the Labour group, help us to put our priorities forward. Things about fair funding for housing, fair spaces, tackling inequality. These are the things that we care about. These are the things we want to do more about. There are other things that another opposition group would want to do, and that's fine. But this is about setting budgets, setting priorities. I will not be supporting the amendments because that's not how you set a budget. That's absolutely not. And I will be supporting the budget, which I think has been very ably explained by Councillor King, and really enjoyed listening to the speakers so far. I don't expect everyone to vote for the budget because that's not how things are done. I know that. We've all been in local politics enough. But setting a budget at this time of year in the current crisis is not just the responsible thing to do, but it's highly irresponsible to play party politics with some of the machinations that we've seen in the last 24 hours. And I think that the Conservatives are better than that to front end load the beginning of the debate in the Have Your Say section with their own political candidates and Conservative members. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bourne. We now have Councillor Goss wanting to speak.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor King, for all the effort you and the officers have put into the budget that is the best possible balanced budget in extremely difficult times, unprecedented. All councils are facing challenges. And we read yesterday about the £90 million of cuts at Essex that obviously currently are not well documented, but I'm sure we'll learn more about that. But back to Colchester. We've heard much from the Conservatives tonight with their last-minute amendments, but we've also heard Councillor Dundas tell us about his 27-page spreadsheet. Well, that sounds like a budget to me. So if he put all that effort in, why not submit it? Why not do the job properly rather than doing it half-baked, which is really what the Conservative opposition have done tonight, disappointingly. Behaviour that I think is below where we should be. I hope Jackie Weavers isn't watching, where people are just disrespectfully interrupting each other, and that needs to stop. We set a good level of behaviour, and tonight I think some people have dipped below that. But in terms of the local plan and in terms of Middlewick, people know my views and some of the things I've said over the years. But what nobody's mentioned tonight is that actually we could look at doing this through the local plan process, and you can do it through an SPD or a DPD or master planning. So you don't need to do the feasibility work, and I don't know where you've come up with the £50,000 from. No doubt it's a line in Paul's spreadsheet, and the £97,000 from Dennis Willits as well. I mean, it's all just figures that are plucked up with nothing to show the workings out in the exam answer. So actually, people on the local plan committee, please take it back there. Please make sure it's on the agenda and do it properly through the process and the budget that already exists. And yes, I have checked because I do my job properly, because I speak to the officers. So that is how you look at getting whatever it is you need onto Middlewick, whether it is a wildlife reserve, a country park, a wildlife corridor, or whatever else. I'm with all the other councillors that have spoken tonight. If the MOD takes it off the table, that saves the land. It leaves it alone. That is what local residents want. But you've also heard the complications that we have with house building and the fact the MOD will want to get the massive capital receipt it needs from that land, so it will want to maximise house building. You've seen it, 2,000 houses they want. We've managed to cap it at 1,000. So I'm going to leave it there, but hopefully some common sense and wisdom will come back to the local planning committee, and the things that have been spoken about tonight can be done by that committee in the right way through the planning process. That is what you should be doing, not coming up with half-baked, politicised amendments in a very lazy way at a budget meeting just before an election, when most of your candidates turn up and ask questions that are all politicised. But Councillor Board has already cut
time, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Goss. That brings the debate to an end, apart from the summing up the 3 amendments. So I'd like to invite Councillor Buston to sum up for up to 3 minutes, and he'll be followed by Councillor King for 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. I hope not to take 3 minutes. I was told when I asked if I could raise a point in the budget debate anyway, that I had to include it within my amendment summing up, so I shall do that. My question in relation to the budget process itself, being a solicitor, I'm aware of the cost of the law, I'm aware of the cost of damages, I'm aware of solicitors' costs. I'm aware that costs in regard to litigation are particularly high. Therefore, I was a little surprised, bearing in mind how professionally Councillor King goes about the preparation of the budget, that I see no particular reference in it to the problem that we've got coming upon us like a tidal wave in relation to the alumno problem. It is clearly going to cost this council, one way or another, a considerable amount of money. So I'm rather surprised that there is no specific mention to an allocation in relation to that. Secondly, moving on to the points of my amendment, it wasn't the back of a fag packet item, it was actually spurred on, I regret to have to say, by experience from your colleagues down in Chelmsford, and the furore that has caused there, which I was rather hoping to avoid for the people of Colchester. Just being factual about it, for the benefit of... Sorry, I beg your pardon?
No, continue.
Thank you, I thought somebody chirruped. For the benefit of my colleague Councillor Gocher, inflation is currently at 0.9%. 3 0.9% are 2.7%. And for the benefit of our colleague Councillor Oxford, there is no intent whatsoever to reduce the amount of money going to this excellent service, which when I was a portfolio holder, I was equally pleased with and equally pleased to expend monies upon. It is a great service, it does us very well. At our last possible moment, that is the last possible service that our council can provide to its residents. And my concern is that the imposition that is proposed is untimely and unseemly. I appreciate nonetheless that everybody's going to vote purely on party political lines, irrespective of what their conscience may tell them. And I find that somewhat disappointing, as the amendment that I put in was not put in on the basis of a party political point. And I'm rather sorry that it is being referred to as such. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buston. We've now got Councillor King to sum up on the amendment. This one amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Buston. I appreciate your remarks both now and earlier. Let's go to different views on inflation. Place your money where let's place our money where we think it will turn out, and better minds than us have failed on that. The language we've used in the report, certainly when we talked through at scrutiny, was I think broadly inflationary, and that is the case. We looked at a series of measures about costs, increases, and other rates of increase in terms of income, and we came to the 2.7%. We took a view of all services, some of which, as members will know, are capped. We cannot increase them. So we took an overall view about fees and charges and took it through scrutiny and cabinet on that basis. And as we did through the members' workshop, and as I recall, and it's fair enough to challenge it now, not with challenge then, it was seen as it's intended to be, as reasonable, a couple of % increase to a very well regarded service that, as described very well by Councillor Oxford, is less expensive than nearby comparators and compares well, it is said, in terms of quality. So it is not reasonable to call it, as it was, cruel or uncaring of us or lacking in compassion to increase this charge by 2.7%. Inflation measures, you take your pick. RPI is forecast to go to 1.5% this year and go beyond that in the years ahead, which I accept is another discussion. CPI, I think the Bank of England suggests it will hit 2% by the end of the year. So it does depend on which point of time, but in my view, it's a narrow interpretation, as I say, it's ×3, and besides which that misleads. This is a great service. It needs to be funded. It's very cost effective. And it's very well regarded, as described by Councillor Oxford and others. And it has concessions of the kind we would all agree on, which were introduced by this administration, but it could have been introduced by any, about free funerals under 18. So this is not about a lack of compassion. This is about trying to strike a sensible balance, which is my advice to all members. That's what we've got to do on the budget, sensible balance. And this is part of that big equation. And it's a very small increase relative to the whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Councillors, I'm conscious we've had 90 minutes since the last break, but I intend, if you're agreeable, to continue with the vote on this amendment and the 6 minutes of speaking on the next 2 amendments, so we can get those wrapped up before we have a break. Are you agreeable to that? Hands up if you're not. Excellent. In that case, we'll crack on. Thank you. So we now go to the vote on the first main amendment. The monitoring officer will take a roll call vote because it's a budget item, so we have to have a named vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So we're voting on Councillor Buston's main amendment. Councillor Arnold.
For the amendment.
For. Councillor Barber. For. Councillor Barlow.
Against.
Against. Councillor Barton.
Against.
Against. Councillor Bentley. For. Councillor Bourne.
Against.
Against. Councillor Buston.
For the amendment.
For. Councillor Chapman. For. Councillor Chillingworth. For. Councillor Chua.
Against.
Against. Councillor Coleman.
Against.
Against. Councillor Cope.
Against.
Against. Councillor Corey.
Against.
Against. Councillor Crowe. For. Councillor Dundas. For. Councillor Elliott. For. Councillor Ellis. For. Councillor Fox.
Against.
Against. Councillor Gocher.
Against.
Against. Councillor Goss.
Against.
Against. Councillor Harris.
Against.
Against. Councillor Hayter.
For.
Councillor Hazel. For. Councillor Higgins.
Against.
Against. Councillor Hogg.
Against.
Against. Councillor Jarvis. For. Councillor Jowers. For. Councillor King.
Against.
Against. Councillor Liddy.
Against.
Against. Councillor Lilly.
Against.
Against. Councillor Lissimore.
For.
For. Councillor Loveland.
For.
For. Councillor Luxford Vaughan.
Against.
Against. Councillor Fiona McLean.
For.
For. Councillor Jackie McLean.
For.
For. Councillor McCarthy.
Against.
Against. Councillor Moore.
For.
For. Councillor Beverley Oxford.
Against.
Against. Councillor Gerard Oxford.
Against.
Against. Councillor Philip Oxford.
Against.
Against. Councillor Pearson.
Against.
Against. Councillor Scordis.
Against.
Against. Councillor Scott Butell.
Against.
Against. Councillor Warnes.
Against.
Against. Councillor Whitehead.
Against.
Against. Councillor Willits.
For.
For. Councillor Wood.
For.
For. Councillor Julie Young.
Against.
Against. The Deputy Mayor.
Not voting.
Not voting. The Mayor.
Abstaining.
Abstaining. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote is 21 for the amendment, 27 against the amendment, 2 abstentions. The amendment is lost, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move straight on to the second amendment. So I'd like to call Councillor Barber, please, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Luxford Vaughan mentioned about changing the amendment to include reference to nature reserve. I don't know if I'm permitted to do this, but if we were able to amend it to include maybe and/or nature reserve after country park, I'd be minded to propose that to council. But I will go on to the rest of the points before maybe you respond on that. The £50,000 is actually the number officers have given us for the cost of the feasibility study. So that's where we got that number from, Councillor Goss and others. It wasn't just plucked from the air. That was what we were specifically told would be the cost. Thirdly, reference has been made to this being last minute. Well, the deadline was yesterday. We're permitted to include amendments up to that hour. We actually have a very narrow window where papers are published and we can amend the budget, and these are not the reports that came through scrutiny verbatim. There are changes and more information. So I would also add that if you cared that much about Middlewick, you would seize any opportunity you had to protect it, no matter how small, no matter the possibility it may not work. You would seize that opportunity. I would do anything for my communities that I represent in my ward and the borough to improve their lives and deliver what they would like, however small and however possible it may not be achieved. This is a relatively small amount of money, but enough that could radically change the future of Middlewick for the better from the current trajectory. We are local councillors. Our jurisdiction on this matter is within planning terms and allocating on the local plan, and councillors voted to allocate housing on that site. They didn't have to. Councillors didn't have to. The planning department have confirmed this in public. I'll send the comments round. That when you have an opportunity to do something you claim you want to, this is the opportunity to do so this evening. And I fail to understand what the hesitancy is in doing so. No coherent explanation has been given. You claim on one hand to want to save the Wick, but you've also voted to allocate housing on it and now missing the opportunity to do something. Yes, the local plan can look into this matter further. It's good you recognise the fact that the local plan does have jurisdiction, but ultimately we cannot do that without funding. If you want us to look into this properly, give us the funding to do so with this £50,000. I do not get, I honestly thought this would be supported because of the claims that have been made by coalition councillors, but clearly it's all falsehoods. They do not really care about the Wick because when they're given the opportunity to show they do so, they have failed to literally put their money where their mouth is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barber, could you just clarify the 3 extra words you want to add to your amendment?
Yeah, sure. So after creation of a country park, I was suggesting and/or a nature reserve.
And
as I've listened to the debate, and that's what was
okay, so and or a nature reserve.
Yeah.
Okay, so full council, all councillors, are we minded to accept that before we vote on the amendment? Have I got any objections to that?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Young, could you just repeat that, please?
I want to make a point of order.
Oh, yes.
I want to propose that this item be referred to the local plan committee for consideration.
Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
I will just confer with the officers, but my concern is there would be no budget for that, even if the local plan. Oh, that doesn't matter according to the Chief Executive. So can it be referred to the local plan? Or bear with me, councillors, I'm getting advice.
You've got a different amendment.
Thank you. I've had a ruling on it from our senior officers, and Councillor Young, while the matter could be referred to the local plan, the budget amendment does need to be decided on. So we will vote on the amendment as put by Councillor Barber and as amended with those four words by Councillor Barber.
This is descending into a farce, Mr. Mayor. Can we just get on with the vote?
Point of order,
No, we
Mr.
have
Mayor.
to agree the wording. Sorry, Councillor Fox, did you want to say something?
Yes, I have a point of order that we debated the motion as written on the order paper, and that is the debate that we had. If Councillor Barber had wished to have a nature reserve on the amendment, he could have done that when the amendment was published, and we should be voting on the amendment as it is written on the order paper.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Fox. So you're not supporting the extra wording. So I have to ask council whether they would or wouldn't accept the extra words. So therefore we will vote on the original amendment.
Mr. Mayor, sorry. If does council, because Councillor Fox has given his opinion, but he's not the full council. So do council not have to decide whether to
on whether they accept the amendment, right? Yes. That's what they need to now do. We're going to have another set of.
As much as I like Councillor Fox, he's not the sole authority on.
Okay, further ruling from above, and that is that if you wish, councillors, we can have a vote on whether we include the extra wording, followed by a vote on the either amended amendment or the original amendment. Is that your wish?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Got agreement. Woo. So we are now voting, Andrew Weavers will take a named vote on the amended amendment, which is...
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Sorry, that's what I'm being told, Councillor Higgins.
Sorry. Yes.
No.
Councillor Luxford Vaughan suggested it, so we're deciding.
No, we're voting on whether we accept the additional wording.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Look, absolutely. Thank you. The mayor and I, Mayor and Councillor Luxford Vaughan agree. So therefore, we are voting on whether you accept including and or nature reserve being added to Councillor Barber's amendment. The vote's now taking place now.
Mr. Mayor, it's Councillor.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. It's Councillor Bourne here. I'm sorry, we need to be clear because normally when we're in the chamber, we're very clear, and I appreciate this is very tricky remotely. Is this a secondary amendment? And have we decided, has there been a proposer and a secondary amendment? Is that what we are voting on now under the procedure?
I'm happy to second the secondary amendment.
Hang on. No, it is not a secondary amendment. the mover of an amendment is allowed to amend his amendment if council agree. So he is allowed to do that. It is not a secondary amendment. But we can vote on it and determine it anyway. That's what I'm being told by officers, Councillor Bourne.
It might be best, Mr. Mayor, if you want to read out what councillors are voting on specifically, so everybody's aware.
And this, Mr. Mayor, will be followed by another vote on the amendment, including the money.
We're having two votes on Councillor Barber's amendment. The first vote will be taken on adding 4 words and or nature reserve after country park. So I will get Mr. Weavers to read out the amendment we are voting on before he takes your vote.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Young.
Can we alter the wording of Councillor Barber's proposal to add that this matter stands referred to the local plan committee, where this matter should be appropriately discussed and decided upon?
Support that.
We need to decide the budgetary allocation. That's
seconded.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, this is the problem.
So if Councillor Barber wishes to add those extra words to his amendment, it's allowed, but otherwise it will be a secondary amendment. I'm sorry, councillors, we're making heavy weather of this. I appreciate that.
No, I would like us just to make the decision on this matter for starters. Then the budget's there in future if the local plan committee are minded to take up, which I hope they do. But
yeah, the local plan committee, I believe, can choose their agenda.
Exactly.
At any time. Right, Mr. Weavers, can we take the vote, please? And will you explain what we're voting on?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what we're voting on is the additional wording being added into this sentence as follows. So it's 7A, support for full feasibility study to construct a workable proposal for a revised allocation at Middlewick, enabling the creation of a country park and/or a nature reserve between Abbots Road and Birch Brook, cost £50,000. Is that right, Councillor Barber?
that is correct, Mr. Weavers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Arnold. Are you agreeable to the additional wording being added?
I am.
That's 4. Councillor Barber. 4. Councillor Barlow.
Not voting.
Not voting. Councillor Barton.
Not voting.
Not voting. Councillor Bentley.
4.
4. Councillor Bourne.
Against.
Against. Councillor Buston.
4.
4. Councillor Chapman.
4.
4. Councillor Chillingworth.
4.
4. Councillor Chua.
Against.
Against. Councillor Coleman.
Against.
Against. Councillor Cope.
Not voting.
Not voting. Councillor Corey.
Against, and saddened that this has brought our council into disrepute.
Against. Councillor Crowe.
4.
Was that 4, Councillor Crowe?
4. Yeah.
4. Thank you. Councillor Dundas.
4.
4. Councillor Elliott.
4.
4. Councillor Ellis.
4.
4. Councillor Fox.
Against.
Against. Councillor Gocher.
4.
4. Thank you. Councillor Goss.
Against.
Against. Councillor Harris. Was that against?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Hayter.
4.
4. Councillor Hazel.
4.
4. Councillor Higgins.
Against, because I don't think we discussed it properly.
Against. Councillor Hogg.
Against.
Against. Councillor Jarvis.
4.
4. Councillor Jowers.
4.
4. Councillor King.
Against.
Against. Councillor Liddy.
Against.
Against. Councillor Lilly.
It's no wonder people are fed up with politics after this. Against.
Against. Councillor Lissimore.
4.
4, Councillor Loveland.
4.
4, Councillor Luxford Vaughan.
4.
4, Councillor McLean, Fiona McLean.
4.
4, Councillor Jackie McLean.
4.
4, Councillor McCarthy.
The behaviour of the opposition tonight has been appalling. I'll be voting
Sorry, how were you voting?
against.
Against, thank you. Councillor Moore.
4.
4, Councillor Beverley Oxford.
Against.
Against, Councillor Gerard Oxford.
Against.
Against, Councillor Philip Oxford.
Against.
Against, Councillor Pearson.
Against.
Against, Councillor Scordis.
Abstain.
Abstain, Councillor Scott Butell.
Against.
Against, Councillor Warnes.
Against, because a country park's not in the best interest of
Against, Councillor Whitehead.
Against.
Against, Councillor Willits.
4.
4, Councillor Wood.
4.
4, Councillor Julie Young.
Against.
Against, the Deputy Mayor.
Against new wording being added at this late stage, Mr. Mayor.
Against, the Mayor.
Not voting.
Not voting. Thank you. Just give me a minute.
While the vote's being taken, Mr. Mayor, can we call an adjournment for comfort break, please?
Yes, I think that's fair. Thank you.
Although doesn't Councillor King respond? not to prolong it, but
Should we not finish this amendment, then take the break? As in this, after the next vote?
Agreed.
Councillor King.
I will follow full council on this. My bladder is just about hold out, but not long.
I support Councillor Young.
We can have the result now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The result is 23 for, 22 against, 5 abstentions. So it is agreed that the main amendment is amended with the additional wording. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, I appreciate your patience. All I can say is we're taking advice and we're following the Constitution to the letter, which is what the rules are made for, however frustrating it might appear. We now have another vote. And then, oh, I beg your pardon, sorry. I really do think we ought to.
For a comfort break, Mr. Mayor.
For that,
I really just think if Councillor King can be brief, we've got less than 3 minutes.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. My ears are about to implode, and I am well overdue a break just to pull my hearing together or to try and make sense of what I'm hearing. I really want a break now, please.
Thank you. That's appreciated. We should have had a break 10 minutes ago. We will now have a break for 12 minutes, which will means we'll come back at 21:20. Is that right? Yes, 21:20. That's 9:20, and we'll reconvene. Thank you.
I think that's 6 minutes, Mr. Mayor, but never, unless my watch is wrong.
No.
to Councillor King.
Right. Well, welcome back, councillors. I apologise for the yes, the complicated rules, but we have followed them, and we are now in the situation where Councillor King has 3 minutes to sum up on the amended amendment by Councillor Barber. Councillor King, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Welcome back, colleagues.
You're muted, Councillor King.
I can hear Councillor King.
We can hear him.
No, I'm not, Mr. Mayor. Maybe just at your end.
You're still muted, Councillor King.
Now the rest of us can hear.
You weren't
Right,
loud
Mr.
enough,
Mayor.
Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr.
Do
Mayor.
carry on.
Thank you very much. May my 3 minutes start there, but you did ask me earlier to be brief.
We need to crack on. Yep.
Yeah, not half. Look, we spent a lot of time, let's be honest, we spent a lot of time tonight talking about this one issue, and for very good reasons, because if you strip away the politics and have a crack at each other, we all agree this deserves attention, doesn't it? We can't, if we're really honest, we're not going to get the MOD, I know inside very well, a monolithic thing doesn't listen to its own people, let alone anybody else. So the chances of turning it round are slight or nil. Ditto for the government. And look, let's just accept that's the case. This is about making the best with what we've got. The 2 ideas proposed as amended, and what a confusion that discussion was, are in themselves entirely legitimate. But here's the point. We don't know which one is right. We don't know whether 50k, I don't know the provenance of that. I accept it's been a number given. I don't know whether that's the right number. I absolutely guarantee this will be a long-term, whatever we do, will be a long-term expensive business. It will need proper budget process, it will need a long-term commitment. If we focus on what we agree upon, Councillor Barber, it would be that this needs to be addressed. But it shouldn't be done here, and I do respect any amendment can come, and there is a schedule for that. It shouldn't be done late in the evening, having a discussion based upon nothing very much of substance that's been shared. We agree on the principle. I am fully supportive. I will say this again later in any forum you would like. I am behind with others, with the administration, in making the best of what we get left with at middle week. I'd rather not have it, but whatever we got left, we'll make the best of it. I will work with officers to find funding for this, because it's not there at the moment, in my view, or it will, if it is, it's at the expense, as your own motion suggests, of something else that has to be done. We just committed ourselves to it a few weeks ago. So for good process, I urge colleagues to vote this down, but accept the personal assurance that I believe I give on behalf of Cabinet and administration, that we will, through the local plan committee and the environment committee, together, cross-party, work out what we should do, take expert advice, consult with the residents, not decide here in late evening, and then make it happen, looking with the developers, Section 106 contributions and everything else. We could unite on this. We should. I pledge, do all I can to make it happen, but not now with no notice, no data, no fact, no independent assessment, no consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. And we now move to the vote on the amended amendment. Is that correct, Councillor, Mr. Weavers?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Excellent. Continue.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold.
For the amended amendment.
For. Councillor Barber.
For.
For. Councillor Barlow.
Against.
Against. Councillor Barton.
Against.
Against. Councillor Bentley.
For.
For. Councillor Bourne.
Against.
Against. Councillor Buston.
For the amended amendment.
For, Councillor Chapman.
For,
Councillor Chillingworth.
For,
Councillor Chua.
Against,
Councillor Coleman.
Against,
Councillor Cope.
Against,
Councillor Corey.
Against,
Councillor Crowe.
For,
Councillor Dundas.
For,
Councillor Elliott.
For,
Councillor Ellis.
For,
Councillor Fox. Against, Councillor Gocher. For, Councillor Goss.
Against,
Councillor Harris. Against, Councillor Hayter. For, Councillor Hazel. For, Councillor Higgins.
Against,
Councillor Hogg.
Against,
Councillor Jarvis.
For,
Councillor Jowers. For, Councillor King.
Against,
Councillor Liddy.
Against,
Councillor Lilly.
Against,
Councillor Lissimore.
For,
Councillor Loveland.
For,
Councillor Luxford Vaughan.
For,
Councillor Fiona McLean. For, Councillor Jackie McLean. For, Councillor McCarthy. Against, Councillor Moore. For, Councillor Beverley Oxford. Against, Councillor Gerard Oxford. Against, Councillor Philip Oxford. Against, Councillor Pearson. Against, Councillor Scordis. Against, Councillor Scott Boutell. Against, Councillor Warnes. Against, Councillor Whitehead. Against, Councillor Willits. For, Councillor Wood. For, Councillor Julie Young. Against, the Deputy Mayor.
not voting.
The Mayor.
Not voting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's 23 for and 25 against. Two abstentions. So the amendment is lost. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weavers. We'll press on rapidly, hopefully, to the third amendment. Councillor Willits, please. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I commend this amendment to council. It tests the green credentials of this council. The mantra seems to be green is good if it costs us nothing, green is better if it makes a profit, and green is bad if it costs us something. And that's what is being proposed, unfortunately. I'm asking the council to accept an ecology project at about £97,000. And it is not a surprise, Mr. Mayor, to the council. There's been copious correspondence on it. I asked questions on this matter and didn't receive anything like a sensible answer at the December meeting. And quite clearly, the Lib Dems and the Labour administration are not interested in this particular green project. The budget is that of the administration. They published their final proposals a week ago in the formal agenda for the council. So we have limited time, Mr. Mayor, in which to put forward any alternatives. And of course, the second mantra of the council is never knowingly accept a change.
The last vote was at 23, 25.
Do we think this evening that there will be one of our amendments accepted, 2 amendments, 3 amendments? Not likely. It's always none, and it always will be none. There is no real opportunity to present a budget by the opposition from first principles. We can't present the 27 pages of Councillor Dundas's spreadsheet, which we would implement if we took control, as amendments, it's just not feasible. There is no provision in standing orders or the Constitution for the opposition to present an amendment, to present a budget, and it really is impossible to do it in the form, well, make significant changes in the form of amendments to someone else's budget. It has to be a completely separate budget if we were going to present it, and that opportunity is not there in the Constitution. I say please support this amendment. It's a very sensible amendment. It will show your green credentials trying to improve what is a particularly bad ecological problem. I ask Council to support.
Thank you, Councillor Willets. And now Councillor King has 3 minutes to sum up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Willets. I'll keep this brief. I think you know the position on this. You should know it's clear that the green credentials of this administration, some which are directly outlined in lines of spend within this budget, are clear, and they reflect the direction that we had from full council. We've followed that through. That's within the strategic plan that full council has endorsed. So whatever conversation and whatever difference we have now about the next steps on Lexton Lake, and you're right to speak to it as a place of beauty that we should do our best with. Now, this is not about our green credentials. It can't be also about a 97K study which has no provenance. What we need to do again is look at what we agree. We agree we need to play our part in addressing issues as the local authority that are our responsibility. You will know, you listed it in your own earlier remarks, that work is underway on water quality, lake flora, fauna, bank management, sediment layer, vegetation management. All of those, I think, were your remarks, they're mine as well. That work is happening. What we need is the results of that work. Then we need a good quality conversation about the next steps. The administration will do what it must, but it should also do the sensible thing for the finances of the council, which is if others are responsible and will contribute or pay, that's a conversation we should have. So I'm afraid I can't accept the amendment. You know this. I can't accept it, not because we're opposed to Lexton Lakes looking lovely, we want it to, or because we won't help, we will, but because there is a proper process part way through. If there's anything we can do better in terms of sharing what is happening, when, and having the conversation at the close about those next steps, well, that's for you as a ward councillor with others to make sure we do that to the standard required. But this does not stand as a main amendment, and it's rejected accordingly.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. We'll now move to the vote on this third amendment. Mr. Weavers, that's the second time. Mr. Weavers, please read out the amendment before we vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amendment is, you want me to read out the whole amendment, Mr. Mayor?
Quickly.
No.
Okay, and it is, and council noting that during the summer of 2020, the fish in Lexton Lake died. It was enveloped by invasive weed and it emitted a foul odour, which constituted a public nuisance to surrounding dwellings. Allocates in this budget £97,000 to facilitate proper remedial work to the lake. Furthermore, that corresponding adjustments are made to reserves to ensure a balanced budget or by such other environments that Cabinet shall take to balance the budget. Councillor Arnold.
Oh, for the amendment.
4. Councillor Barber.
4.
4. Councillor Barlow.
Against.
Against. Councillor Barton.
Against.
Against. Councillor Bentley.
4.
4. Councillor Bourne.
Against.
Against. Councillor Buston.
For the amendment.
4. Councillor Chapman.
4.
4. Councillor Chillingworth.
4.
4. Councillor Chua.
Against.
Against. Councillor Coleman.
Against.
Against. Councillor Cope.
Against.
Against. Councillor Corey.
Against.
Against, Councillor Crowe.
4.
4, Councillor Dundas.
4.
4, Councillor Elliott.
4.
4, Councillor Ellis.
4.
4, Councillor Fox.
Against.
Against, Councillor Gocher.
4.
4, Councillor Goss.
Against.
Against, Councillor Harris.
Against.
Against. Thank you. Councillor Hayter.
4.
4, Councillor Hazel.
4.
4, Councillor Higgins.
Against.
Against, Councillor Hogg.
Against.
Against, Councillor Jarvis.
4.
4, Councillor Jowers.
4.
4, Councillor King.
Against.
Against, Councillor Liddy.
Against.
Against, Councillor Lilly.
Against.
Against, Councillor Lissimore.
4.
4, Councillor Loveland.
4.
4, Councillor Luxford Vaughan.
Against.
Against, Councillor Fiona McLean.
4.
4, Councillor Jackie McLean.
4.
4, Councillor McCarthy.
Against.
Against, Councillor Moore.
4.
4, Councillor Beverley Oxford.
Against.
Against, Councillor Gerard Oxford.
Against.
Against, Councillor Philip Oxford.
Against.
Against, Councillor Pearson.
Against.
Against, Councillor Scordis.
Against.
Against, Councillor Scott Buttell.
Against.
Against, Councillor Warnes.
Against.
Against, Councillor Whitehead.
Against.
Against, Councillor Willits.
4.
4, Councillor Wood.
4.
4, Councillor Julie Young.
Against.
Against, the Deputy Mayor.
Not voting.
Not voting. And the Mayor.
Not voting.
Not voting. Thank you. The results of the vote are 22 in favour, 26 against. The amendment is lost, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. So we now have the unamended original budget put by Councillor King, who has up to 3 minutes if he wishes to have it before we go to the vote.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's so much said tonight that 3 minutes could disappear in just the introduction. So, in fairness to everybody, I will keep myself to that time well as I must. So, look, the first thing is thank you. What a conversation! What a set of unexpected discussions and near breaks part of the way through. We know, thank you for conviction, passion, and talking to what matters to you. From my perspective and administrations, the issue to some degree is less, and I understand the time constraints for the opposition, less about reasonable issues that deserve and have had a very good hearing than getting them late and not being able to talk them through. And more fundamentally, the fact that the opposition have not acknowledged that there is a need for offset, genuine offset, or genuine additional funding. Without those, we make this budget incoherent. And without that, we risk services to our people and the jobs of our own staff. That's nothing we should feel good or proud about. I want to acknowledge, however, not the negatives, but the positives. There are many things which we agree. We all care about Colchester. We all care about what we do to it for the better in the main. We agree on most of those things. We agree on the challenge, nailing Jenny to the wall. Councillor Dundas, I agree. We can agree that whatever the number of pages each of us have in our own Excel sheets, turning it to reality is a tough old thing, especially in these circumstances, and that our officers deserve the thanks that we have given them. The stance we've taken against the main amendments is not awkwardness for its own sake. They are legitimate, all of them. Bereavement services, I think, widely accepted here. We are a good local authority. We do the right thing by people, and we don't need to feel apologetic about this. Middle Wick is the area where we need to do more work, and I repeat the promise I made. We will follow this up to try and find a way, as we should, on something that would last for a generation or more, and fit it in with what else we're doing. We're doing work in Cymbeline Meadows, or we hope to do so. Now, we need to value all that we have that is green and wonderful and adds that sense of destination. It's for us all to do that through the local plan committee, the environment committee, that's my promise with officers, to do our very best to find what will be, I suspect, a long-term and probably significant funding stream. So this is not about opposition to a change to the budget. It's about the timing of it, and it's about how we then craft and deliver it and agree on it in the right kind of way, in a way that will carry support locally, not just be yet another difference on which we can have an argument. So I'll stop there, Mr. Mayor. I thank all the members for contributing with such conviction and passion. I love the fact that you, more political than me, could turn on a sixpence and probably apply the same passion to a different subject. But you know, it's been a good conversation. I appreciate the contributions and the acknowledgements, and the passion with which they've been delivered with knowledge, style, and substance. And we'll take the lessons we can, and we'll take the budget forward, and I commend it accordingly. It's good for the town, it's good for the borough, it's good for the future.
Thank you, Councillor King. Passion from yourself as well, of course. We now go to the vote. Mr. Weavers, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to confirm that we are voting on motion B. Councillor Arnold.
Against.
Against. Councillor Barber.
Against.
Against. Councillor Barlow.
For.
For. Councillor Barton.
For.
For. Councillor Bentley.
Against.
Against. Councillor Bourne.
For.
For. Councillor Buston.
Against.
Against. Councillor Chapman.
Against.
Against. Councillor Chillingworth.
Against.
Against. Councillor Chua.
For.
For. Councillor Coleman.
For.
For. Councillor Cope.
For.
For. Councillor Corey.
For.
For. Councillor Crowe.
Against.
Against. Councillor Dundas.
Against.
Against. Councillor Elliott.
Against.
Against. Councillor Ellis.
Against.
Against. Councillor Fox.
For.
For. Councillor Gocher.
For.
For. Councillor Goss.
For.
For. Councillor Harris.
For.
For. Councillor Hayter.
Against.
Against. Councillor Hazel.
Against.
Against. Councillor Higgins.
For.
For. Councillor Hogg.
For.
For. Councillor Jarvis.
Against.
Against. Councillor Jowers.
Against.
Against. Councillor King.
For.
For. Councillor Liddy.
For.
For. Councillor Lilly.
For.
For. Councillor Littymore.
Against.
Against. Councillor Loveland.
Against.
Against. Councillor Luxford Vaughan.
For.
For. Councillor Fiona McLean.
Against.
Against. Councillor Jackie McLean.
Against.
Against. Councillor McCarthy.
For.
For. Councillor Moore.
Against.
Against. Councillor Beverley Oxford.
For.
For. Okay, thank you. Councillor Gerard Oxford.
For.
For. Councillor Philip Oxford.
For.
For. Councillor Pearson.
For.
For. Councillor Scordis.
For.
For. Councillor Scott Boutel.
For.
For. Councillor Warnes.
For.
For. Councillor Whitehead.
For.
For. Councillor Willits.
Against.
Against. Councillor Wood.
Against.
Against. Councillor Julie Young.
For.
For. The Deputy Mayor.
For.
For. The Mayor.
For.
Thank you. The vote is 29 in favour, 21 against. Motion B is agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weavers. Councillors, I beg your indulgence. We are running short of time. We are meant to stop at 10 o'clock in quarter of an hour, but it's a legal requirement that we deal with item 9 on the agenda. So I propose to move straight to it, which is the review of members' allowances, and ask Councillor Corey to introduce it. He has up to 5 minutes, but I'm hoping he won't need it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the recommendations set out in the Monitoring Officer's report be approved and adopted on item 9, the members' allowance scheme. I won't take up the time. We've had a long evening already. But I would say that this scheme is something that's independently reviewed, and a number of us as group leaders and myself as leader of the council and some others have been asked about our allowances and expenses, and the independent remuneration panel have said that no increases will occur at this time, but they have talked about how we need to look at how the staff are looked after with sort of mental health support and support, especially at this time, and about actually how councillors should have that same support. And I would urge that we do treat this institution a bit better and not have such sort of short-term issues come up, and we need to talk to each other much more and before the day before or the budget evening. So we do need to treat each other with more respect. So going forward, hopefully that we can agree these and agree that kind of stance of improving the support for each other and seeing that the conduct that the staff and support the staff have is something that we follow too. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Corey. You do have 3 minutes at the end to sum up as well. I only have one speaker showing their hand up, and that's Councillor Willits. Councillor Willits, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is a matter on which I feel I have strong personal views. They may be different from my group, but I'm still going to express my views on this matter. I won't be calling for a vote on it because it was a recommendation from an independent panel, but because it's independent, it doesn't mean it's intrinsically fair. If we look at the national statistics, local authority pay increases have been some 1.5% over the last year, and this has influenced the panel in their considerations. But private sector pay has actually decreased by some 2.6% over the year. And it seems perverse to me that we have 85% of the residents in the borough working in the private sector who on average have seen a drop in their pay of 2.6%, asked to fund increases in some of the councillors' allowances. I think it would have been fairer to have aligned ourselves with the 83% of residents, taken a cut of 2.6% in our allowances and said, we share the pain with you, residents of Colchester. What really prompted me to speak on this issue, Mr. Mayor, was recommendation D, which effectively says that councillors should be encouraged to grab every allowance going. And the wording from the report is that the leader, deputy leader of the council and group leaders be encouraged to promote uptake of all allowances available to councillors. The theme seemed to be that councillors should not be dissuaded by public concern or disgust at their grabbing of every possible last pound from the expenses pot. I think that is ethically wrong, which is what prompts me to speak on this, and brings councillors into a low esteem with the public. If councillors need to claim an allowance, by all means do so. But I think we should be like the voluntary public service, school governors, parish councillors, and we should try not to be a burden on the council taxpayer unless it's necessary. And we shouldn't have a report before us encouraging councillors to claim everything that's going. Mr. Mayor, I remember the odium that was heaped on me when I was appointed chair of the borough's finance and scrutiny panel and announced I would not be taking my special responsibility allowance. This apparently was the most heinous crime a councillor could ever commit, and I came under intense pressure to reverse my decision. My final point, Mr. Mayor, I'd assume that the reason why councillors now in increasing numbers were cycling was to improve their health and save the planet. How disillusioned I was to see when I read this report that we are paying fit, active councillors 20 pence a mile to cycle to and from the town hall, but provide no allowance to old and infirm councillors like me to come in on their electric scooters. Not that I've ever made a claim for a mileage allowance in 10 years. It would be impolite not to support the independent panel's call, but I certainly do.
Councillor Willits, I apologise, we're short of time and you've had 3 minutes. Thank you. The next speaker is Councillor Lewis Barber, followed by Councillor Patricia Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only to add really that if there's councillors who don't feel comfortable taking the increase in allowance. Perhaps Mr. Weavers can distribute a note via email to explain how we could perhaps return that to the taxpayer, because I personally don't feel comfortable taking a raise at this time when many of my residents are struggling due to the pandemic. And also I do feel that we need to uphold still the independent suggestion because from the panel, because that sort of otherwise undermines the purpose of having it independent. But I'm personally not happy to take the raise, particularly when this council's just increased my residents' council tax bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, please.
Thank you. I'll be quite brief. I actually think that with the current situation and the increasing loss of jobs and hardship that is coming in the rest of the public, not just our voters, but the rest of the public, I think it's obscene to be voting ourselves a raise. I'll say no more than that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Apologies, I've got Councillor Tina Bourne with her hand up now. Councillor Tina Bourne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, it is outrageous to suggest that people shouldn't take the allowances that are afforded to them. The council is a local government organisation that has decided on allowances for councillors, and we have had councillors in the past and possibly councillors now who are also claiming welfare benefits, and they are not afforded the same salaries that other councillors are, and it is there to address the unfairness and to ensure that those particular councillors do not have the ability, or they're not allowed to send back part of their allowance or all of their allowance. It's all counted in for welfare benefits rights into their the household income, so they're not allowed to do that. So I find this a very unequal debate, and we should not be having it. Either vote for it or vote against it, but we don't need to see your hair shirts, frankly.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bourne. Absolutely, we want to encourage everybody to the opportunity to be councillors and represent their community. We now have Councillor Lee Scordis, followed by Councillor Dundas, and we have 8 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It'll be very short, and I think Councillor Barber has a good idea around the fact that people could find a way around it if they don't want to take the rise. But I think the other option is, and what I'm planning to do, is spend some of that money in my ward on community assets. We have a locality budget. Maybe we could top it up with a bit of our own extra money if we feel the need. Some people are struggling and we don't want to cast an eye on them as well. So I think the option is there for all of us. And as Councillor Barber has made the point, it is an independent panel. We do have to go with that. And we're not talking the masses that some people feel we have. I think one councillor was accused of making £70,000 a year. And as you know, we make usually just under 7,000, but that's going to rise slightly. So we're not talking massive amounts here, but it's up to each councillor how they'll spend theirs, and mine will be going into my community.
Thank you very much. And now Councillor Paul Dundas.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor. To be very brief, I was at the meeting, actually, obviously not where the decision was taken, but where this was discussed. And I think it's important I explain the comments slightly on the expenses. Now, it was discussed at length, and one of the problems we agreed was that in the past, perhaps some councillors had abused it. They've been using it for anything and everything. The fact is, our normal allowances cover our normal travel around our wards and for doing our day-to-day work, like going to the town hall. However, it was also agreed there are times actually when councillors genuinely do have to travel. If you have to go in as a councillor for a meeting in London before 9 o'clock, it can mount up to quite a lot of money. And it was agreed that actually some councillors who perhaps cannot afford just to shell out 50, 60 quid for a train ticket on a regular basis, having to travel somewhere for work, should be able to claim it and shouldn't actually feel guilty about it. So that is what the driver was behind that. And I agree, it is important that being a councillor is open to everybody from all different backgrounds and all different circumstances. And I think perhaps we should be careful of sitting in judgment of others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dundas. I'm being reminded that the independent panel recommended a 0% increment over on related to the staff pay. So we are not being, there's no actual increase until the staff pay is agreed. And of course, it's always optional for all councillors to choose how much they take as that allowance. They do not have to take the full amount if they feel that way. Anyway, we have a choice. We can go to a named vote, or we can agree if nobody objects. So are there any objections to not having a vote and agreeing it on the nod?
Let's agree it.
Okay, there are no hands disagreeing, so therefore we will take it as deemed agreed. Thank you very much, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
We have, just to finish the meeting tonight, we have got, bear with me, portfolio holding decisions, I think, to agree. To note, that's schedule 10. So are these noted? They are.
Agreed.
Urgent items, there are none. So I'm afraid, sorry, hold on. Mr. Weavers would like to speak.
Sorry. Mr. Mayor, can I just take you back to item 8, questions to cabinet members and chairman. There were 2 pre-notified questions. One was from Councillor Chillingworth and to Councillor Goss, and perhaps you'd like to invite Councillor Goss to give a written answer back to Councillor Chillingworth, and also for Councillor King to give a written answer back to Councillor Crowe.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just say, I have written to Councillor Crowe and be happy to share that if that's helpful, but certainly to follow up as needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And if Councillor Goss could also share his reply to his pre-notified question, then all councillors...
It's written, ready to go.
Yep. So thank you. So Councillor King and Goss could share it to all councillors. Everybody will be informed. And
I'm
thank you
tempted
for your...
to say, Mr. Mayor, that you have no authority here, Mr. Weavers, but in fact you do, don't you? So.
Well, I think everybody's agreeing, Councillor Young, so we're okay.
Yeah, that you probably haven't got that reference, Robert.
We'll see what you do next year.
Yes. Read the regulations and understand them.
Anyway, I'd like to, I'm afraid we'll have to forego questions. We've only got 2 or 3 minutes left. I apologise for that, but we've had a useful debate and we have agreed a budget, which is a legal requirement. So I wish you all well, and we hope to see some of you back after the May elections at the next full council meeting, which will probably be on Zoom again. Thank you very much and keep safe. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.